Chapter 1137. The Underworld, Wretched Earth. This was a gloomy and deathly silent world. As far as the eye could see, the heavens and the earth were dark, and there was an endless amount of nether fog rising from the horizon. There was no sun or moon, and it was desolate since ancient times. In the center of this world, there was a magnificent ancient palace. It was tens of thousands of feet tall, and it was completely black. At this moment, there were many figures with terrifying auras sitting in the palace. Their bodies were covered by nether energy, and they were roaring like the sea. However, these nether race experts all had different appearances. There were tall creatures with human bodies and horns, and there were short and strong midgets wearing demonic armor. However, these people all had fearful expressions, and their eyes were gloomy. In the palace, there was a figure wearing a dark gold divine cannon. He was holding his chin with one hand, and he seemed to be sleeping. It was a young man with long eyebrows and fair skin. There was a diamond-shaped mark between his eyebrows that looked like a scale. It was black and purple in color, and it looked strange and mysterious. Although his divine face was a little feminine, it was also peerlessly handsome, and it gave people a feeling of nobility and elegance. At a certain moment, there seemed to be a trace of worry between his eyebrows, and it caused the atmosphere in the palace to suddenly freeze. In fact, even the faces of the living beings of the nether dimension who possessed terrifying auras turned pale, and they even gasped for breath carefully. The young man slowly opened his eyes and yawned lazily. He lowered his head and looked at the people below. "Have you found out?" "Nether Lord, not yet, but it is said that the reincarnation of the Nether God is a young man who has awakened the Nether God's sacred body. He is born with a sense of destiny. Now, the people of the Nether race have been spreading that the Nether God will be the opportunity for our race to break the seal and return to heaven and earth." One of the Nether race experts stood up and bowed carefully to the young man. "The reincarnation of the Nether God?" The feminine young man smiled brightly. However, at this moment, the Nether race expert felt a chill rising from the bottom of his feet. Before he could kneel and beg for mercy, black flames suddenly surrounded him. In just one breath, he was burned into nothingness. The entire palace was silent. All the experts of the Nether clan lowered their heads while terror filled their eyes. However, they weren't surprised at all. Obviously, they'd already thoroughly understood the temperament of the Nether Lord. If the Master has truly returned from reincarnation, I am naturally willing to return the Underworld clan to him. However, if someone is deliberately spreading rumors, I will kill them without mercy. The effeminate young man smiled gently and walked towards the back of the palace. "Oh, by the way, tell the 10 great Yama kings to find the reincarnation of the god of the underworld. I am very interested in him." "Yes." Only when the young man's figure was far away did everyone in the hall heave a sigh of relief. However, at this moment, everyone's eyes contained a faint trace of worry. With the disposition of the Nether Lord, even if the young man in the rumors was really the reincarnation of the Nether God, how could the Nether Lord be willing to return the vast Nether world to him? However, when they thought of this Lord's methods, a thick chill filled their hearts. Forget it. He could only wait and see if there was anyone else among the 10 great kings of hell who still had fear in their hearts. At the same time, at the edge of the underworld, Chen Qingshan was dressed in black and was sitting in a pavilion. After coming to the Netherworld, he realized that this world was not much different from the green sky world. Even the living beings were of all shapes and sizes, and there were all kinds of them. However, the spiritual energy in this world was thin, and it was dark. All the living beings of the Underworld clan were pale and looked extremely weak. However, after merging with the mark of the god of the Underworld, Chen Qingshan vaguely felt that there were 10 extremely powerful auras in the Netherworld, and they seemed to be related to this mark. Perhaps they were the key to him controlling this world. Qingshan. When a graceful figure suddenly walked over from afar, Chen Qingshan put down his wine cup and looked forward. A rare trace of gentleness appeared on his face. "You are back." Ever since that day, when the dream demon followed him to death, Chen Qingshan's disposition had changed a little. Originally, when Gu Xi'er died, it caused him to fall into a demonic state overnight, and his disposition became cold. Other than Ling Xiao and the dream demon, almost no one could cause his emotions to fluctuate. However, the current him seemed to have more of a smile on his face, and even his gaze was not as cold as before. "Yes, Qingshan, I have found out that the netherworld is now divided into 10 lands, and there are 10 underworld kings in charge. Their cultivation levels are unknown, but they all submit to one person, the current underworld lord. It is said that this person used to be the servant of the god of the underworld." The dream demon walked up to Chen Qingshan and smiled softly. 10 underworld kings? Servant of the god of the underworld? Chen Qingshan's eyes narrowed. Was it a coincidence? Why did his mark of the god of the underworld also have 10 waves of soul consciousness? It seemed that he had to find a chance to verify it. "I understand. Let's stay here for a few days." However, with Chen Qingshan's current strength, he could easily kill an ordinary saint, let alone the 10 underworld kings. Since the Lord had asked him to control this world, it would not be something that could be done overnight. The most important thing now was to enter the saint realm as soon as possible. Only then would he have the opportunity to control the world. Even if the underworld lord used to be the servant of the god of the underworld, after so many years, it was hard to guarantee that he would not be disloyal. It was safer to be safe. Deity Battlefield, Central Divine Mountain. Ling Xiao frowned as he looked at the voice transmission talisman in his hand. His eyes seemed to be deep in thought. It had been 3 days since Xiong Huan and the others went to Stupa Abyss. However, the two of them did not see any living beings walk out of the abyss. However, based on Zhang Juji's experience, it was most likely the mandate of heaven. It was impossible for him to die so easily. Could it be that he had already obtained the opportunity and left Level Mountain Domain? Now that he was being hunted, he would not dare to show himself so easily in the short term. How was he going to find this leak? Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed slightly, and a smile suddenly appeared at the corner of his mouth. According to Gu Chaoxiai, the mandate of heaven had walked out of the demon domain to verify Tsang Ning's identity and prove the innocence of the Sirius clan. Now that Lei Yun had been killed and he did not know about it, he would definitely secretly search for her after he stepped out of the abyss. Moreover, the mandate of heaven was used to being so promising. Wherever there was an opportunity, they would be there. Whenever there was a commotion, they would join in. They would probably not miss the Dao Tian Academy. However, once Zhang Juji arrived at Dao Heaven City, they would miss the best opportunity to set up a trap. If the powerhouses of the Thunder Dragon clan found him before Ling Xiao, it would be more troublesome to make him take the blame. It seemed that it was time to give this mandate of heaven some benefit. Since he was looking for him, he would take the initiative to appear. In this way, why should he worry that he would not fall into the trap? With that thought in mind, Ling Xiao suddenly took a step forward. The dragon shadow beneath him appeared and rushed in the direction of Level Mountain Domain. With Zhang Juji's cultivation, even if he rushed with all his might, he would not be able to reach the center of Azure Sky. Ling Xiao only needed to set up some traps halfway. Even if he wanted to hide his identity, he would not want to miss it. "Young master, wait for me." Chapter 1138. Master, Master. At the peak of the mountain, Xianyuan Weiyang stepped forward and chased after Ling Xiao. Hearing the shout behind him, Ling Xiao frowned and slowed down. He waited until Xianyuan Weiyang was beside him before he continued to fly. "Master, where are you going? I heard that a treasure has appeared in the Tianyan region. I am going to check it out." Ling Zhao's tone was calm. He summoned Lin Meng, and she appeared beside him, scaring Xianyuan Weiyang. This is, Lin Meng has been in the territory and has never seen Xianyuan Weiyang. Therefore, the two women's faces were full of curiosity. They checked each other out from head to toe, and their eyes were full of surprise. Meng, this is the Xianyuan royal family's princess. Ling Xiao smiled gently. Lin Meng cultivated with the moon of Xianyuan for a long time and had a deep relationship with her. Hearing Xianyuan Weiyang's identity, Lin Meng was shocked and hurriedly bowed. So it's Princess Xianyuan. Since the beginning, this destined lady had been timid. She was respectful towards the other women around Ling Xiao. It was exactly because of this that Ling Xiao intended to give her a new background so that it could temper her Dao heart. The Tianyan region was a region that one must pass between the southern demon region and the azure region. The biggest sect in this region was the Holy Fire sect. Rumor has it that there was a heaven's favorite in this sect called Qing Feng. He was one of the 100 heroes of the azure region. According to Ling Zhao's investigation, this person's talent was originally average. It was because he merged with a spiritual fire of heaven and earth that he became a supreme and was accepted as a disciple by the Holy Fire sect. The spiritual fire was a spiritual object of heaven and earth. With the spiritual fire of heaven and earth, Qing Feng's battling capabilities were terrifying. Ling Xiao guessed that this person was most likely the one who killed Elder Ling and sent his soul to the lower realm. Usually, such villains would not have a good ending. Although Qing Feng had obtained the blazing scripture, it wasn't complete. That was why he was suffering from a hidden illness and living a life worse than death. It was said that the Sacred Flame sect master had tried to find some good medicine to help him suppress his internal injuries, but it was useless. What? Do you think I'm going to kill someone again? Childish. I, Ling Xiao, am the light of the righteous path. Of course, the purpose of this trip is to cure this senior apprentice brother Cheng's hidden illness. As for whether he dies or not, what does that have to do with me? Dying, send out the secret guards and spread the news. Say, a treasure has appeared in the Tianyan region. Ling people's young master, Ling Xiao, is on his way here. Ling Xiao sent a voice transmission with his soul. Then, he seemed to have thought of something. Send someone to find out if the Sacred Fire sect had an expert called Ling or something like that. Yes. Dai Ying was still searching for Qing Mu Supreme in the demon region. Although the Sacred Fire Ancient sect was a first-rate sect, it wasn't an immortal inheritance. Moreover, Elder Ling was extremely talented in the Tao of Fire. He was definitely not a nobody. A few secret guards could go to the Tianyan region and find out. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. At this time, on the ancient mountain in the center of the Tianyan region, a group of Sacred Fire sect elders were frowning as they looked at a red-robed figure in the hall. Sect Master, I've already sent a disciple to find out as you instructed. But it seems that no secret realm has appeared in the Tianyan region recently. Impossible! The red-robed middle-aged man shook his head slightly. His cold and dignified face was solemn. If one looked closely, they would see that his hair was covered in flames. Every strand of it was burning fiercely. Huiyan, the Sacred Fire sect master, was an 8th-level Saint Realm expert. Just yesterday, there was a rumor in the Tianyan region that Ling Xiao, the young master of the Ling people, was on his way here. But, with the Sacred Fire sect's control over the Tianyan region, he should know if a treasure had appeared. Just in case, Huiyan still sent a disciple to search the entire region. But in the end there was still nothing. However, the young master of the Taigu Ling people would not come to the Tianyan region for no reason. What went wrong? Sect Master, there are 3 more days until Qing Feng comes out of seclusion. Didn't you say that when Feng comes out of seclusion, he will be officially appointed as the successor of the Sacred Fire sect? Since Master Ling Xiao is on his way here, maybe we can invite him to come and watch the ceremony. Below the hall, an old man with white hair and beard said in a deep voice. Yes. Huiyen frowned slightly and nodded silently. No matter what Ling Xiao came for, as the master of this region, he did not dare to be negligent. Moreover, the young master's arrival might be an opportunity for the Sacred Fire Sect. As long as he could win the young master's favor, the Sacred Fire Sect might be able to rise to the top of the Azure continent. Go and prepare a divine weapon, preferably a sword. I heard that Master Ling Zhao's sword principle is unparalleled. Let's cater to his taste. Huiyen looked up at the people in front of the hall. Send another disciple to keep an eye on him. Yes. At the same time, in the Tianyan region, Zhang Juji, dressed in a linen robe, was walking in an ancient city. In the past few days, he had deliberately concealed his whereabouts and even disguised his face to avoid being hunted down. Although he had not figured out who wanted to kill him, Zhang Juji speculated that there were only two possibilities. One was that Lei Yun's enemy wanted to kill him as well. The other was that someone in the Sirius clan did not want him to be the young master. In addition, he had been in seclusion for 200 years and had just come out. How could he have an enemy? As for Ling Xiao, he had heard many rumors about the young master of the Ling people. It was said that this person was righteous, magnanimous, and had the holy name of the human emperor. Whether this rumor was true or not, no one knew his whereabouts except for the Sirius clan. Even if the young master of the Ling people hated the Sirius clan, he could have just sent people to destroy them. Why would he want to kill him? Therefore, Zhang Juji was more inclined to the second possibility. Lei Yun was domineering and was the young master of the Thunder Dragon clan. There must be many people who wanted to kill her secretly. He was just unlucky to have appeared at the right time. Have you heard? Recently, there has been news in the Tianyan region that a treasure will appear in our region. Even the young master of the Ling people has been attracted to it. What? Which young master of the Ling people? In the entire Azure realm, besides young master Ling Xiao, who dares to take the surname Ling? Burp. Is my Prince Charming really coming? No, I have to lead my senior and junior sisters to welcome the young master. The originally quiet ancient city was suddenly bustling with noise. A look of surprise appeared on Zhang Juji's face. Master Ling Xiao? This was really. Someone sent him a pillow when he wanted to sleep? Originally, he had come out this time to find the young master of the Ling people to confirm the matter about Song Ning. Previously, he was still hesitating about how to meet the young master with his status. Now, it seemed that this problem was solved. Moreover, a treasure that could attract the attention of this young master, just thinking about it was enough to make one excited. Chapter 1139. In the northern part of the Tianyan region, a golden dragon was flying over. The wind was howling, and there was an endless amount of auspicious light. However, what was terrifying was that such a great demon was pulling a white jade chariot. A young man was sitting in the chariot, and there were beauties on both sides of him. Ling Xiao looked down at the Tianyan region under his feet, and a playful smile appeared on his face. With Long Zhao's speed, it would take him less than 2 days to get here from the Divinity Battle Domain. The reason why he purposely delayed for 2 days was to give Zhang Juji enough time to find out about this news. At the same time, he wanted to set up a place of fortune. The Tianyan region was vast. There were countless mountains and forests, so it was normal for there to be some hidden places of fortune. Bai Ling had already arrived here yesterday. Even if there were no secret realms in this region, Ling Xiao could arrange one for Zhang Juji. Of course, he had to fatten a pig first. Only then would it taste good. Of course, the precondition was that this son of destiny would take the initiative to appear and have the potential to take the blame. Otherwise, Ling Xiao still had a luck-plundering talisman in his hand. Young master! Look, what is that? Suddenly, Xianyuan Weiyang stood up from the jade chariot and looked at the sky in the distance, her eyes trembling. Hearing this, Ling Xiao followed her line of sight, only to see that at the end of the world, There were many figures of spiritual light rushing over at an extremely fast speed. There were at least thousands of them. However, these people's cultivation levels were generally at the venerable realm or even lower. Obviously, they were the younger generation of the Tianyan region. Lord Ling Xiao. I see Lord Ling Xiao. Golden Dragon Jade Chariot, black-robed immortal face. It's Lord Ling Xiao. It's Lord Ling Xiao. I'm going to collapse. Countless women screamed. Even with Xianyuan Weiyang's temperament, she couldn't help but tremble. She didn't expect the youths of the Tianyan region to be so enthusiastic. However, after thinking about it for a moment, she understood the reason. Half a month ago, Ling Xiao had annihilated the Gone Heaven Divine sect by himself. Moreover, he had killed the young master of the Xiao clan for a servant. Whether it was in terms of character or generosity, it was enough to make people revere him. Moreover, who would be able to reject a young master of the ancient clan with peerless beauty and a terrifying background? Moreover, this young master's temperament was so gentle and flawless. Lord Ling Xiao. I love you. Sir, please look at me. Young master. My name is Bai Lu, and I am willing to follow young master. I hope young master will accept me as a servant. Some prodigies started to recommend themselves. Ling Xiao stood up and waved at the crowd with a warm expression. Especially when he saw the linen-clothed figure in the crowd, the smile on his face grew even more brilliant. Although this young man's appearance was ordinary and his clothes were ordinary, he shouldn't have attracted any attention. However, such a brilliant luck value was simply like a star in the night sky. It was dazzling and extremely beautiful. 20,000 luck value, good fortune sacred body, yin-yang law, sun-moon divine pulse. There was a wisp of extremely obscure demonic qi on his body, which was somewhat similar to the one on Song Ning. It couldn't be wrong. Zhang Jiuji in the mixed destiny. Indeed, he was a big leak. According to Ling Xiao's guess, this model of the Son of Destiny must have a terrifying luck value. However, the 20,000 luck value still surprised him. Could it be that in addition to the holy body and divine pulse, this leak was hiding some other shocking good fortune? Interesting. Ling Xiao smiled brightly and nodded at the prodigies. His demeanor immediately attracted another round of exclamations of admiration. Lord Ling Xiao. Until there was a buzzing sound between heaven and earth. A figure with a terrifying aura stepped from the distance and stood in front of Ling Xiao. It's the Sacred Flame Sect Master. I didn't expect Sect Master Huoyan to come personally. Haha, I thought that Huoyan had some backbone. I didn't expect him to be a bootlicker like me. Fellow cultivator, you're wrong. How can bootlickering Lord Ling Xiao be considered a bootlicker? Young master is unparalleled in the world. This is a chance for us to improve ourselves. Sect Master Huoyan. Ling Xiao's eyes were clear, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously curled into a smile. Previously, the secret guards had sent news that there was an expert in the Sacred Fire sect 1,000 years ago. His name was Ling Chen, and he was an amazing talent who had extremely high attainments in both alchemy and fire Dao. Furthermore, the current sect master of the Sacred Fire sect was only his junior brother. If not for his undeserved reputation and indifferent temperament, Huoyan would not have been able to become the sect master. And Cheng Feng was his disciple. Unfortunately, the Way of Heaven was jealous. It was said that 400 years ago, when Ling Chen first tried to merge with the spiritual fire, he burned his body and divine soul. However, Ling Chen's contribution to both alchemy and fire Dao was the key to the Sacred Fire sect's rise to the top. Therefore, even if he died unexpectedly, everyone in the Sacred Fire sect was in awe at the mention of Ling Chen's name. As his successor, Cheng Feng was even accepted as a disciple by Huoyan as an exception. This young man did not disappoint and actually completed what Ling Chen could not do. He merged the spiritual fire of heaven and earth into his body, and from then on, his cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. Now, Huiyan even abolished the former young master of the Sacred Fire sect and planned to make Qing Feng the successor of the Sacred Fire sect. This matter was once spread by the various forces in the Azure Sky realm, and countless experts praised the friendship between Huiyan and Ling Chen. Little did they know that Ling Chen's death was not an accident at all, and the one who should have come to the Heaven Fire region was not Ling Xiao, but Lin Shi. This Qing Feng should be a small climax of the plot, and the relationship between Lin Shi and Elder Ling would be exaggerated to the extreme. However, it was a pity. Elder Ling, only I can avenge you. Master Ling Xiao. Huiyan's expression was respectful, and he cupped his hands toward Ling Xiao. I heard that young master has come to the Heaven Fire region, so I specially led the elders to welcome you. I hope young master will do me the honor of coming to the Sacred Fire sect to guide your cultivation. Huiyan's smile was humble, and it surprised all the geniuses of the Heaven Fire region. Sect master, you are too polite. A few days ago, I happened to get an ancient scroll, and it recorded the location of a secret realm. Sect master, take a look and see where it is in the Heaven Fire region. Ling Xiao waved his hand and took out an ancient scroll made of sheepskin from his Qian Kuan ring, and handed it to Sect Master Huiyan. Huiyan's eyes trembled slightly, and he opened the ancient scroll to take a look. Yes, it is indeed in the Heaven Fire region. It should be in the Thunder Volcano in the northwest. I see. Thank you, Sect Master. This Thunder Volcano was specially selected by Ling Xiao from several regions. Since it was a layout, of course, it had to be as reasonable as possible. Thunder Volcano, listen to me. If I say there is an ancient divine thunder in this mountain, no one will doubt it, right? Everyone, I found this ancient realm by chance. Why don't we go and check it out together? Ling Xiao smiled gently, and he raised his head to look at the geniuses of the Heaven Fire region. His eyes were extremely cold. What? Young master intends to share this secret realm with us? This. Chapter 1140. Young master, you mean? Huiyan's eyes trembled, and he was also shocked. Everyone wanted to monopolize a secret realm, especially one that had never appeared in the world and could only be opened with ancient maps and spiritual items. There were many real treasures hidden in it. However, judging from Ling Xiao's words, was he planning to share the mystic realm with everyone? What else was there to say? Lord Ling Xiao, you are righteous. Sect leader Hua, I will go to the Sacred Fire sect later. Ling Xiao looked at Huiyan calmly, which stunned the Saint Realm expert and made him lower his head in fear. Huiyan, you have lived for so long, but you still want to have peaches. With young master's strength, even if all the talents went together, how could they compete with him? However, if they went, how could young master search for treasures in peace? Yes. Young master, the young master ceremony of the Sacred Fire sect is in 3 days. I will invite all the sect leaders of the Tianyan territory to a banquet. I hope young master will do me the honor and come to the Sacred Fire Mountain to watch the ceremony. Huiyan looked serious and took out a red ancient sword from his interspatial ring. He presented it to Ling Xiao with both hands. Young master, your presence brings light to the Tianyan territory. Please accept this small gift as a token of my respect. Oh? Haha, thank you, sect leader. Ling Xiao nodded slightly and put the divine ancient sword into his bag. Then, he sat in the carriage and headed to the Thunder Volcano in the northwest of the Tianyan territory. Everyone, fortune has appeared in the world, and the fated ones will get it. Follow me. Young master. Righteous. The group of heavenly talents from the Tianyan realm immediately bowed and followed Ling Xiao. Amidst the crowd, Zhang Jiuji looked surprised and nodded silently. He was indeed the young master of the Ling people, the human emperor. His magnanimity was really awe-inspiring. Of course, Zhang Jiuji was also pondering at this moment. Although Ling Zhao's actions were righteous, wasn't he overly confident? Perhaps, in the eyes of this young master, they, the so-called geniuses of the same generation, were not even qualified to compete with him. As he thought like this, Zhang Juji's eyes were instantly suffused with a strand of battle intent. This fortune had been delivered right to his face, so how could he not seize it? 9 extremities. Be careful, I have a feeling that this young man is not simple. Within the 9 suns Buddha sword, Yin softly reminded with a grave tone. With her cultivation base, Huoyen and the other Sage Realm experts couldn't detect her existence at all. Although Ling Zhao's gaze only lingered on Zhang Juji for an instant, Yin seemed to feel that this young man seemed to have noticed something. There was a slight fluctuation in his emotions. Of course it's not simple. Zhang Juji grinned. There was no fear in his eyes. He is the most respected genius of the current generation in the Azure world. From Lei Yun and Great Elder Tsongyan's attitude, he already understood what the words Taigu Ling people meant. Originally, he thought that with such a background, Ling Xiao would definitely be an arrogant and despotic person. However, he didn't expect to be so surprised when he saw him today. This young master of the Ling people was not only gentle and beautiful, but also a generous and dignified person. From his body, Zhang Juji could see some of the arrogance that belonged to top geniuses. His celestial aura overlapped, and his Tao was natural. Unfortunately, this young master of the Ling people didn't seem to be one of the 13 taboos of the current generation that his master had mentioned. As such, to Zhang Juji, it wasn't much of a shock. However, just as Zhang Juji was muttering to himself, he saw the young man in black suddenly turn his head and look at him in the distance. There was a gentle smile at the corner of his mouth, giving off a feeling of a spring breeze. For a moment, Zhang Juji felt a chill in his heart. Impossible! Yin was a second-grade earthly sovereign. Even sect master Huoyen and the others didn't notice her existence, so how could this young man have a clue? Senior Yin, from now on, without my permission, don't release a wisp of aura for the time being. To be safe, Zhang Juji reminded her softly to avoid any unforeseen circumstances. I got it. At this moment, Ling Zhao's gaze only paused on Zhang Juji for a moment before he looked at the sky again. However, there seemed to be a smile at the corner of his mouth. For a moment, he could feel a trace of gloomy aura from Zhang Juji's body. Obviously, as he had guessed, this young man had some hidden good fortune on him. Legend had it that the Buter Abyss was a place where demons lurked. In the past tens of thousands of years, countless creatures had fallen in there, but this chosen one had walked out unscathed. The good fortune Saint Physique's uniqueness lay in the word fortune. Wherever it went, misfortune would turn into blessings. The more dangerous a place was, the more likely it was to hide some terrifying good fortune. And these good fortunes were mostly prepared for the chosen one. It was likely that the treasure in the Buter Abyss had already fallen into Zhang Juji's hands. According to the rumors, this treasure was likely to be an evil treasure. Interesting, it seemed that the plan could proceed smoothly. Buzz! It was only when Ling Zhao's figure descended from the sky and landed in front of a pitch-black ancient mountain that a look of excitement appeared on the faces of the prodigies. A mystic realm that could attract Master Ling Xiao to personally come must contain some extremely terrifying secret. Even with their cultivation levels, they would most likely not be able to obtain the treasure. However, to be able to follow Master Ling Xiao and drink some soup was also a waste. Everyone, according to the ancient map, the treasure is in this mountain range. However, whether you can find it or not depends on your luck. Ling Xiao held an ancient sheepskin scroll in his hand and nodded seriously. That's right. It should be here. Thunder Volcano. Just from the name alone, one could tell that this mountain contained the power of thunder and fire. It was said that tens of thousands of years ago, a bolt of heavenly thunder had descended here, causing heavenly fire to burn the mountain. It burned for a full 900 years, burning the entire mountain to its current pitch-black and terrifying appearance. Back then, the Sacred Fire sect had also sent experts into the mountain to search for the treasure, but in the end, they found nothing. However, since Master Ling Shao said that there was a treasure in the mountain, it could only mean that the Sacred Fire sect was blind and did not have the luck to obtain the treasure. Let's go. Ling Shao kept the dragon carriage and took the lead in walking towards the mountain. Beside him, Xianyuan Weiyang and Lin Meng also stepped out and followed closely behind. Seeing this, the prodigies from the Tianyan domain, who were still hesitating, immediately turned into flowing light and rushed in all directions. Only Zhang Juji seemed to be pondering. In the end, he actually followed Ling Shao from afar and entered the strange rocks in the mountain. Instantly, the entire thunder volcano was filled with the sound of wind, and countless flowing light shone in the sky. Ling Shao looked at the map as he went deeper into the ancient mountain. He did not stop for even a moment along the way. As expected, young Master Ling people has a purpose. He should know the exact location of the mystic realm. Zhang Juji's eyes were deep, but there was a faint smile on his face. At this moment, he did not dare to get too close to Ling Shao, for fear that the young master of the Ling people would sense his aura. The path to immortality was cruel, and everyone was fighting to pass it. Moreover, killing people for treasures was the will of heaven, and it did not affect one's Tao heart. Although Zhang Juji was not afraid of Ling Shao with his identity, he must have many treasures in his hands. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, it was better not to go against him. Chapter 1141. For the whole day, Ling Shao had been wandering in the depths of Mount Ray. At this moment, he seemed to be hesitating, and his eyes were searching the valley in front of him from time to time. Zhang Juji, on the other hand, was standing on a mountain in the distance, carefully observing the valley under his feet. This valley was extremely neat, as if it had been smashed by a divine object. However, on one side of the valley was a pitch-black cave abode, while on the other side was a rapid waterfall that flowed downwards. Even though they were very far away, Zhang Juji could feel that the aura in this valley was obviously more scorching and irritable than the other places in the Thunder Volcano. Moreover, this place was not at the peak of Mount Ray, but at a secluded place at the foot of the mountain, so it was not very eye-catching. It should be here. In the end, Ling Shao walked to the front of the cave, and his body was suddenly surrounded by spiritual light. Then, he directly led Xianyuan Weiyang and Lin Meng into the cave and disappeared. When his aura completely disappeared, Zhang Juji descended from the sky and stood at the entrance of the cave. He hesitated for a long time, but did not dare to rashly step in. At this moment, he did not know what was hidden in the cave, and he was not sure what the space inside was like. If he rashly entered and disturbed Ling Shao, it might be the beginning of a disaster. Forget it, I'd better not take the risk. Zhang Juji sighed and turned to look at the direction of the waterfall. For some reason, he had a faint intuition that there seemed to be another world behind the waterfall. There seemed to be a faint trace of the power of thunder flowing in it, but it was hidden by the rapid flow of the waterfall. Could it be that the real fortune is behind this waterfall? Zhang Juji frowned slightly and walked to the front of the waterfall. In the next moment, an ancient sword suddenly appeared in his hand, and he slashed at the waterfall. Boom! The roar resounded, and it was quickly extinguished. Zhang Juji's face almost instantly froze, and his eyes seemed to be flickering with excitement. At this moment, he seemed to see that behind the waterfall there was a pitch-black cave entrance. The cave entrance was extremely small, and it was dark and narrow. It was surrounded by two rocks, and there was only a thin and long gap. There seemed to be water flowing out of the cave, and it was very mysterious. There really is something here. Zhang Juji turned his head and glanced at the surrounding space. When he was certain that no one was paying attention to him, he plunged into the black hole. Boom! At first, the cave's stone path was damp and narrow, winding and secluded. After walking for several li, it suddenly opened up. A wisp of spiritual light silently blossomed from within the cave. Like a barrier, it stopped Zhang Juji in his tracks. "This is," Zhang Juji frowned and swung his ancient sword again. A terrifying aura began to recover. On the Buddha sword, a great sun sank in the west and fell with a loud rumble. The entire cave trembled for a moment, and then the barrier shattered like an ice crystal. Immediately after, an extremely violent energy of lightning poured down, and it almost knocked Zhang Juji to the ground. Damn it! What a terrifying lightning power! Zhang Juji's eyes narrowed slightly. The ancient sword in his hand blocked in front of him, emanating a myriad of rays of divine light. As for the lightning energy that was swimming in the air, it suddenly froze for an instant. After that, in an inconceivable manner, it actually fell to the ground and turned into flowing lightning liquid. Just looking at the pitch-black sticky color was enough to make one's heart tremble. Only now did Zhang Juji see that in the depths of the ancient cave, a ball of pitch-black lightning was jumping and buzzing, as if it was facing a great enemy. It should be a divine lightning of heaven and earth that is being nurtured here. As expected of the good fortune saint body, you can even encounter such a divine object. Yin Yu's voice came from Zhang Juji's soul sea, and the latter's face immediately surged with excitement. Divine lightning of heaven and earth. This divine object was no different from the spiritual fire of heaven and earth. It was where the real fortune was. He didn't expect that he would find such a divine object when he saw a black hole and wanted to enter it to explore its mysteries. The fortune is with me. Senior, how can I take away this divine lightning? Now that Ling Xiao was in the valley, if he made too much noise, it would inevitably attract covetous eyes. If it was an ordinary fortune, the young master of the Ling people would not care about it. However, once the divine lightning of heaven and earth was integrated into one's body, it would have a qualitative improvement to one's physical strength. If you have a high-grade sacred artifact, maybe I can try to capture it. Yin Yu's figure appeared out of thin air and waved her hand to seal the entrance of the cave. She had an evil body and had lost her physical body. This lightning was her nemesis. High-grade sacred artifact? Senior, you think too highly of me. Zhang Juji shook his head and smiled bitterly. Not to mention a high-grade sacred artifact, the only spirit treasure he could take out was the Nine Sons Buddha. Different from the human race, the real foundation of the monster race was the talent of the physical body. Sacred artifacts and spirit treasures were rare. Moreover, his master had always been indifferent and had never given him a decent treasure. However, this ancient sword could seal Yin Yu, maybe. Don't look at me. My soul body is afraid of things with extreme yang. This divine lightning is terrifying. Once it is sealed in the sword, I'm afraid I will be gone. Yin Yu shook her head and turned to look at the entrance of the cave. It seems that the only way now is for you to integrate it. What? Zhang Juji's eyes trembled. In a flash, he understood Yin Yu's intention. His good fortune saint body was the peak of the 9 heavens and was comparable to a sacred artifact. It was suitable for him to integrate the divine lightning. However, Ling Zhao's hesitation just now showed that he had noticed the strangeness of the waterfall. Once he came out of the cave, he would probably investigate this place. Don't hesitate. If you miss this opportunity, you will regret it. I will seal this place. You should integrate the divine lightning as soon as possible. Even if someone breaks in, I will help you escape. Remember, on the path of immortality, only by being strong can you be truly powerful. Yin Yu's tone was profound. Now, she and Zhang Juji were born as one. The stronger this young man was, the more powerful blood spirits she would have the opportunity to devour and extend her life in order to reappear in this world. Okay. I will do as you say. Hearing this, Zhang Juji clenched his teeth. Without any hesitation, he stepped in front of the dark lightning. Suddenly, an extremely bright light bloomed around him. Buzz! Heaven and earth shone together. A great sun and a silver moon reflected each other's brilliance, standing above the cave. In Zhang Juji's hand, the Nine Suns Pagoda emitted a dazzling evil light. The pagoda domain was displayed and instantly wrapped around the lightning. The terrifying power of the lightning instantly surged, but there was no trace of fear on the young man's face. He stretched out his hands and suppressed the lightning. Calm your mind. Wrap the lightning with your soul power and integrate it with your spiritual power. Don't worry, you can control the Nine Suns Pagoda, so this divine lightning is naturally nothing. Behind him, Inu said coldly. Demonic light also fluctuated around her body, enveloping the world and concealing all movements. Chapter 1142. Above the valley, the void rippled. A black-clothed figure appeared. There was not the slightest ripple on her delicate and cold face. Bai Ling looked at the waterfall coldly, and the corners of her mouth seemed to curl up. The creation behind the waterfall was naturally prepared for Zhang Juji according to Ling Zhao's instructions. Although Bai Ling did not know why Ling Xiao would give such a powerful godly item to a stranger for no reason, Ling Xiao had no idea why. However, since brother did so, he must have his reasons. With this thought, Bai Ling's figure hid in the void again, and she quietly guarded the entire valley. All the geniuses who broke into this place felt an inexplicable chill on their necks, and then they completely lost consciousness. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. At this time, Ling Zhao's figure had already walked out of the cave, and he looked at the waterfall in front of him calmly. Lin Meng and Xianyuan Weiyang stood beside him, and their pretty faces flickered with a touch of doubt. Although the cave was long and deep, there was no creation in it. However, not only was the young master not annoyed, but he was also quite relaxed. Young master, is there anything strange about this waterfall? Xianyuan Weiyang blinked her eyes and frowned slightly. With her cultivation level, it was difficult for her to find a clue under the cover of a second-grade earthly sovereign's divine soul. However, according to Bai Ling, Zhang Juji had been in there for almost 2 days. Therefore, if he did not investigate further, it would be too deliberate. That's right. This waterfall contains a very faint trace of thunder power. Since there is no creation in the cave, I'm afraid, the real creation is behind this waterfall. Ling Xiao smiled faintly, stretched out 2 fingers, and gently chopped down in front of him. Suddenly, there was a sudden sound of a sword whistling through thousands of miles. A ray of clear light suddenly appeared, and with the momentum to cut through the void, it pierced through the firmament, and brazenly chopped down toward the waterfall. Hearing the commotion coming from here, the entire thunder volcano immediately shot up into the sky, standing tall in the void and looking over. At this time, the originally rapid waterfall quietly stopped. Then, the entire mountain peak was neatly split apart from the middle and fell to the side. A winding path suddenly appeared, leading to a spacious and obscure cave. Inside the cave, Zhang Juji's body glowed with a dark light. He was like a great demon that had appeared in the world, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Pucci! With Zhang Juji's good fortune saint body, he would have needed another day to completely fuse with the nether tribulation divine thunder. But it just so happened that he was interrupted by Ling Xiao at the critical moment, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood, and even the aura around him seemed to have withered slightly. He raised his head and looked angrily at the sky. In the next moment, his eyes suddenly focused. At this moment, he was able to see that numerous figures were densely packed in the sky, and they covered the heavens and the earth. Moreover, their gazes towards him contained a strand of shock and hatred. Devil? How dare you, wretch? How dare you hide here? Fellow Taoists, I propose that we kill him. Zhang Juji forced himself to calm down, suppressing all the lightning energy within his body. He held the ancient sword in his hand horizontally as he carefully looked at everyone. With his current cultivation, if he didn't borrow the power of the Een Moon, he wouldn't be able to compete with these thousands of disciples. But once the Een Moon was exposed, it seemed that he would be completely recognized as a devil. Should he explain to them that the light emitted from his body wasn't a devil's brilliance, but the greatest fortune here, a divine thunder of heaven and earth? But it seemed that it was still a dead end. Not to mention whether Master Ling Shao would hold a grudge against him because of this. A spiritual treasure of heaven and earth was enough to attract the true greed of the world. It seemed that he was definitely going to die. Not good. Why is my junior brother gone? My cousin seems to have gone missing too. Damn it. Could it be that they were all killed by this devil? Beep. The chosen one's Tao heart is filled with anger and anger. Congratulations to the host for plundering 2,000 luck points and 20,000 villain points. It's you? Just as the Sky Prides were filled with righteous indignation and were about to kill Zhang Juji with their numinous treasures, Ling Zhao's voice suddenly rang out. At this time, there seemed to be a flicker of doubt on his face, and there was obvious disappointment in his deep, dark eyes. Everyone, I've been in this valley all this time, but I didn't feel any trace of fighting. Ling Zhao's indifferent words caused everyone to be stunned. They then silently extinguished the spiritual radiance around them. With young master's words, the youth in linen clothes' life was saved today. Also, I felt that the aura on this fellow cultivator's body wasn't evil. Instead, it had a kind of extreme yang intent. Ah, young master is wise. Now that young master mentioned it, I also felt that the aura didn't seem to be a devil's intent. That's right. Thank young master for reminding us in time. Otherwise we would all be in big trouble today. Which dog was the one who led us astray just now? Damn it, aren't you afraid that someone will take you out one day and kill your whole family? When he heard everyone's words, Ling Shao immediately waved his hand to signal for them to be quiet. Then, he said with a solemn expression, I know that the Sky Demon has descended, and everyone in the Azure Domain is in a state of panic. However, we cultivators must not panic because of this. We must not wrong a good person and let an evil demon go. Young master, righteousness, as expected of the Lord Ling Shao. Such a character is worthy of our respect and learning. Alright, in less than a month, it will be the day of the Tao Heaven Mansion Master's lecture. Everyone, let's meet again if fate wills it. After he finished speaking, Ling Shao no longer hesitated. He stepped forward, and the jade chariot appeared under him, and he headed toward the center of the Tianyan region. Now that this little extreme had entered the picture, there were still 4 senior sisters before he could cut it off. There was no hurry for now. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. Young master is leaving just like that? Could it be that the young master had already obtained the fortune in the Thunder Volcano? It shouldn't be. Judging from the way the young master cut the barren mountain with his sword just now, it was obvious that he was looking for something. Suddenly, everyone's eyes trembled, and they seemed to have a guess in their hearts. Could it be that the glow on the youth in linen clothes just now was the fortune that Master Ling Shao was looking for? Extreme yang and extreme strength. That was the power of thunder? Inexplicably, the eyes of many demons seemed to be suffused with scarlet light, and their eyes were filled with greed when they looked at Zhang Juji. The corners of Zhang Juji's eyes trembled slightly. He didn't dare to hesitate at all, and he immediately turned around and rushed into the distance. Although, just now, Master Ling Shao had clearly said that innocent people were not to be killed indiscriminately. However, at this time, several figures still chased after Zhang Juji. How could the fortune that could make Master Ling Shao come in person fall into the hands of a mountain youth so easily? Look at the way he's dressed. He's obviously trash with no background. As long as he is clean, no one will care if he is killed. Juji, go to the east. There is a saint stage great demon there. I will find a way to conceal your aura and let these people die by themselves. Yin Yu's voice came from the Sea of Soul, and a sinister smile appeared on Zhang Juji's face. Chapter 1143. In the eastern part of the Tianyan region, the ancient forest had turned into a sea. Zhang Juji was hiding in the branches of an ancient tree, coldly looking at the demonic aura in the distant forest. Following a series of screams, the dozen or so sky prides who had been chasing after him were instantly devoured by the saint-level demonic beast on the spot. Phew! Zhang Juji heaved a sigh of relief and frowned as he looked at his Dan-Si. Just now, he had been interrupted at the crucial moment of fusing with the divine thunder, causing the fusion to be incomplete. At this moment, he could feel an extremely violent force corroding his meridians and Dan-Si. If he did not handle it properly, he might very well fall into a demon. However, when he thought of what Ling Xiao had said and done just now, some of the prejudice in his heart dissipated. He could see a trace of disappointment in Ling Xiao's eyes. He had probably guessed that the creation in this valley had fallen into his hand. Even if the Sky Prides had beaten him to death just now, no one would have blamed Ling Xiao for the crime. All he had to do was wait quietly, and he would be able to take back the creation of the divine thunder. Zhang Juji did not believe that the young master of the Ling people had come all the way here without knowing what he was looking for. However, he had not done so. Instead, he had taken the initiative to help him resolve the crisis. Although the feeling of being protected was very uncomfortable, Zhang Juji had to admit that at this moment, he had some recognition of Ling Xiao's character. The young master of the ancient clan was neither arrogant nor rash. He had a righteous heart. On the path to immortality, any young man with a background would be 70% arrogant and 30% domineering. However, the second generation of the largest clan in the Qing-Tsang region was so humble and humble. Now that Zhang Juji had appeared in the world, he had not shown off at all, nor did he have a holy name. In front of the colossus that was the Taigu Ling people, it would not be an exaggeration to say that he was an ant. However, just as the Lord Ling Xiao had said, he could not kill the innocent. He was a righteous young man who truly cared about the common people in his heart. He also fully understood that all lives were equal, and there was no distinction between nobility and lowliness. At this moment, even Zhang Juji couldn't help but want to shout, "The Lord Ling Xiao is unparalleled in this world." It seems that Song Ning might have really colluded with the demons. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been reduced to such a state. Zhang Juji shook his head and sighed. Based on his understanding of Song Ning, this young master of the Sirius clan had always been overbearing and tyrannical. For the sake of good fortune, he had no qualms. It was not impossible for him to side with the evil demons. At the very least, after witnessing Ling Xiao's character, he was more willing to trust the young master of the human clan who had just saved his life. Juji, you must suppress the divine lightning in your body as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will damage your meridians. Yin Yu's voice rang out. Zhang Juji nodded and turned to head north. Given fifth senior sister's temper, she must be completely anxious now that they had been delayed for another 3 days. Unfortunately, the two of them had parted in a hurry, so they didn't leave behind any message tokens. As such, he could only hurry to the sky of Dao City and find a way to suppress the divine lightning in his body. Beat. The Chosen One is grateful to the demon and acknowledges the sky demon's character. The courting of death has begun. Congratulations to the host for plundering 1,000 luck points and 10,000 villain points. Thousands of miles away, Ling Xiao sat in the jade carriage. When he heard the system's notification, he smiled gently. "Young master, what are you so happy about? Didn't you not find the good fortune?" Xianyuan Weiyang rested his chin on his hands and tilted his head. He looked at Ling Xiao in surprise. The good fortune of heaven and earth belongs to those who are fated to obtain it. If I don't find it, it will not be mine. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. He lowered his head and looked at the ancient mountain that pierced through the clouds below. The ancient mountain was shrouded in mist and was full of spiritual energy. There was a red glow that stretched for thousands of miles, like the divine light of the sunset, connecting heaven and earth. Vaguely, there was a kind of elixir fragrance that made one feel refreshed and intoxicated. There were layers of golden palaces on the mountain. Figures with powerful auras stepped down from the sky and landed on the mountain peak, causing a burst of laughter. Ling Xiao smiled and turned to look at Lin Meng. However, at that moment, the chosen one's eyes were filled with reluctance. She pursed her red lips but didn't dare to say anything. Let's go. Ling Xiao drove the dragon carriage and landed from the sky, instantly attracting countless gazes. However, the people on the sacred fire mountain today were all leaders of famous forces in the Tianyan region. At this moment, a wisp of surprise and anger appeared on many people's faces when they saw someone actually control the chariot to the ground. Moreover, the person sitting in the carriage seemed to be a young man, holding two beautiful women in his arms. Damn! Arrogant and shameless. Who is this dandy from? How dare he come to the Tianyan region? Just as everyone was guessing how the Sacred Fire Sect Master, Huoyan, would deal with such an arrogant and rude junior, they saw Huoyan, who was originally sitting upright and still in front of the Great Hall, suddenly stand up and take a step forward, heading straight for the dragon carriage. Take a guess. Do you think there will be blood at the ceremony of the young master of the Sacred Fire Sect today? It's hard to say. With old Hua's character, he will most likely kill such an arrogant junior with one slap. Look at his anxious face. That young man is going to be unlucky. The leaders of the two sects chatted softly. However, the moment they finished speaking, many leaders of the surrounding forces stood up and walked toward the young man. Suddenly, a chill seemed to rise from the bottom of their hearts. In particular, the leaders of the surrounding sects looked at them as if they were looking at two fools. Ha 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 ha, Master Ling Xiao, we are honored by your presence. Your presence brings light to our humble dwelling. Huoyan smiled brightly and led a group of experts from the Tianyan region to bow to Ling Xiao. The two leaders of the small sects had not yet stood up, but their lower bodies were already wet. That young man was Master Ling Xiao. In the past few days, they had heard that a big shot had come to the Tianyan region. He was the young master of the Taigu Ling people. But they really did not expect that the young master would appear so abruptly, giving people a kind of unreal feeling. What was wrong with the young master holding two beautiful women? Was this shameless? This was obviously universal love. On the square, Ling Xiao walked out of the jade carriage and looked at the two leaders of the small sects who were sitting in their original places with a gentle smile. Their Taoist hearts, which were on the verge of collapse, were finally completely shattered when Huoyan and the others looked at them. Puchi! At this moment, in the eyes of the crowd, they seemed to see the true meaning of reincarnation. Young master, please. Huoyan coldly snorted and gave the two of them a deep look. Only then did he turn his head and welcome Ling Xiao to the front of the hall with a smile on his face. As for him, he sat at the bottom and looked at Lin Meng with some surprise in his eyes. He did not know if it was an illusion, but at this moment, he felt a trace of an extremely familiar aura fluctuation from this young girl. Moreover, this fluctuation made him, a Saint Realm expert, feel a little scared. Master Ling Xiao. He was indeed mysterious and unpredictable. Even the maidservant beside him was a person chosen by the heavens. Young master, please taste the elixirs refined by the Sacred Fire Sect. My disciple has come out of seclusion today, and the ceremony will begin soon. It's okay. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. He picked up a jade-white elixir on the table and suddenly thought of something. He turned to look at Huoyan and said, "The disciple that sect leader Hua mentioned is called Qing Feng, right?" "That's right. My disciple, Qing Feng, is the most talented person in the Sacred Fire sect in the past 10,000 years. I didn't expect you to know him. Huiyan was stunned and inexplicably surprised. Oh, then it can't be wrong. Chapter 1144. I can't be wrong? Huiyan's mouth trembled, but he hesitated when he saw that Ling Xiao had already turned his head away from him. Why does Master Ling Xiao sound so unfriendly? However, since Ling Xiao didn't say anything, he didn't dare to ask further lest he upset the young master. It's only been half a year since the young master of the Ling people was born. Feng hadn't left the mountain to train at all during this half a year, so theoretically, the two of them shouldn't have any interactions, let alone hatred. Maybe I'm thinking too much. Huiyan forced himself to calm down, but there was still a hint of worry in his eyes. Buzz! Suddenly, a buzzing sound came from the depths of the mountain in the distance, and a bright and deep flame swept through the world. The scorching waves surged like a tide, like the sea of stars, enveloping all directions and giving off an extremely terrifying and oppressive feeling. Under the raging flames, a blue-clothed figure stepped through the air. When his feet landed, the shadow of a flame lotus evolved on its own, looking quite magical. At this moment, Ling Xiao could see that there was a dark blue flame lingering on the young man's body. The power contained within was almost the same as the two spiritual fires that he had fused with. It was obvious that this flame should be the one that Elder Ling wanted to fuse with back then. However, in the end, he was betrayed by his disciple and almost died. He escaped with his remnant soul, and by chance, he hid it in his ring and was picked up by Lin Shi. Of course, without Ling Xiao, with Lin Shi's luck, he might be able to break through the shackles of the lower realm 30 years later and come to the sacred Fire Mountain to uncover this secret. However, Elder Ling, 30 years is too long. I, Ling Xiao, am seizing every moment. Feng Huiyan's expression was solemn, and there seemed to be some pride in his eyes. At this moment, he could feel that Qing Feng's cultivation had entered the 8th level of the Venerable Realm. Although Feng was slightly older, and he was now more than 600 years old. Compared to the true top monsters in Qingtsang, his realm was not outstanding. However, one had to know that Feng talent was mediocre before, and he was a complete trash. Ever since he cultivated the cultivation technique created by senior brother Lingchen and dared to be the first in the world to fuse with the spirit flame of the heavens and earth into his body, he was able to attain his current accomplishments. On the path to immortality, talent was one thing, but what was more precious than talent was one's temperament. Starting from humble beginnings, he was unyielding and kept moving forward. Even though Feng often suffered from the backlash of the spiritual fire, he never stopped cultivating. Instead, he grew through pain time and time again. In Huiyan's opinion, such a young man would one day reach the peak of the world and overlook an era. Of course, the current Qing Feng could be said to be carrying all the hopes of the Sacred Fire sect. As long as he could safely step into the heavenly sovereign level, the Sacred Fire sect would become the true top force in Qingtsang. Master! Qing Feng descended from the sky and bowed to Huiyan and the elders of the Sacred Fire sect. Then, he looked at Ling Xiao in surprise. At this moment, he could see that this youth, whose bone frame was at most in his early 20s, seemed to be sitting in the most prominent position in the middle of the plaza. Whether it was Huiyan or the other elders, they all looked at him with reverence. Who is he? Qing Feng was inexplicably curious, but more than that, he felt an inexplicable chill. Especially the gentleness in the youth's eyes. Under the sunlight there was no warmth at all. This is Feng. Let me introduce you. This is the young master of the Taigu Ling people, Lord Ling Xiao. A few days ago, he came to the Tianyan territory to explore the secret territory. I invited him to the Sacred Fire sect to participate in the Sacred Fire ceremony. Huiyan smiled brightly and bowed slightly to Ling Xiao. Young master, this is my disciple, Ching Feng. Senior brother Ching, I've heard a lot about you. Ling Xiao nodded with a smile and sized up the youth in front of him. As for Ching Feng's information, he had already sent a shadow guard to investigate. Ling Chen's disciple, ordinary talent. It was precisely because he cultivated the blazing scripture that he had today's achievement. Master Ling Xiao. It's getting late. I think we should start. Hui Yen looked at Ling Xiao and felt that the young master was looking at Feng Er with a playful gaze. Haha, of course. Ling Xiao nodded, picked up a cup of spirit liquid on the table, and took a sip. Everyone, clang. However, just as Hui Yen stood up and attracted the attention of all the sect leaders, Ling Xiao suddenly put down the cup in his hand, making a crisp sound. Oh, I suddenly remembered, sect leader Hua. Hui Yen swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. The uneasiness in his heart grew stronger, but he still did not dare to be negligent. Young master? Senior brother Ching, he wasn't your disciple before, was he? That's right. Hui Yan's expression turned serious, and his eyes seemed to be filled with vicissitudes. Feng Er used to be my senior brother Ling Chen's disciple. Unfortunately, my senior brother was a genius, but he died young. Feng Er did not disappoint and inherited my senior brother's legacy. In my eyes, the position of Sacred Flame Sect's sect leader should belong to my senior brother. Now that I've made Feng Er the young master, as long as he stays true to himself, when his cultivation reaches the saint realm in 100 years, I'll pass the position of sect leader to him. Master! Ching Feng's eyes trembled, and his expression was quite moved. The surrounding sect leaders nodded one after another, and their eyes were filled with admiration. Who said that the path of immortal Tao was full of deception? The relationship between sect leader Hui Yen and his senior brother Ling Chen should be passed down through the ages and praised by the world. I see. Ling Xiao stood up and walked to Ching Feng with a gentle smile. I heard that senior brother Ching has merged with a heaven and earth spirit fire? That's right. Ching Feng frowned slightly. He naturally felt the hostility in Ling Xiao's eyes. However, at this moment, he was somewhat puzzled. He and this young master did not know each other, and they had never offended each other. Why would he deliberately make things difficult for him in today's ceremony? In fact, Ching Feng was purely thinking too much. Even if today was not the ceremony for him to ascend to the position of young master, since Ling Xiao had come to the Tianyan domain, he naturally did not intend to let him go. A bastard who deceived his master and destroyed his ancestors, of course, he would let him suffer the cruelest evil in this world. What? Elder Ling was killed by me? Didn't I just want him to be reincarnated earlier? Isn't it a waste of his talent to be a wandering soul all day long? I heard that senior brother Ching has suffered serious injuries after merging with this heaven and earth spirit fire? Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. Senior brother Ching, have you thought about where the problem lies? Ching Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. He suppressed the anger in his heart and said calmly, This cultivation method was created by my master, Elder Ling, when he was alive. It has not been perfected yet, and no one dares to try it. Back then, when I was an emperor god, I merged with the heaven and earth spirit fire in order to fulfill my master's last wish. I hurt my meridians and elixir sea. However, I, Ching Feng, have a clear conscience and do not regret it. At this moment, Ching Feng was wearing a blue robe, and his face was cold and resolute. He really did look like a genius of this generation and the light of the righteous path. Haha. However, at this moment, Ling Xiao suddenly grinned, and the sarcasm in his eyes could no longer be concealed. What a clear conscience! Chapter 1145. If Elder Ling heard this, he would probably crawl out of the underworld and kill you personally. Ling Xiao's face darkened. Suddenly, a magnificent aura descended from the sky, causing the wind and clouds to change. Heaven and earth fell silent. Ling Xiao had already guessed that since Qing Feng could kill Elder Ling in the Emperor God realm, he must have taken advantage of the crucial period when Elder Ling was fusing with the spiritual fire. Moreover, according to normal circumstances, what evil intentions could the old grandpa have? It was not that he did not pass the burning scripture to this disciple on purpose. He was most likely worried that the scripture was incomplete and would lead to a calamity. It was a pity that Qing Feng's talent was ordinary. He must have been ridiculed by many people in the sect. Deep in his heart, he must have yearned for power and respect. His master's concern might have been a sign of distrust in his eyes. In the end, the master and disciple had a rift in their hearts, which led to this tragedy. What? Young master, what do you mean? The entire Saint Volcano had long since fallen silent. At this moment, all the experts in the Tianyan region were looking at the black-clothed figure in front of the hall in astonishment. Their eyes were filled with confusion. Judging from Master Ling Zhao's words, could it be that there was a hidden story behind Ling Chen's death? You have to ask Senior Brother Qing what I mean. Senior Brother Qing, have you ever thought that it was not a problem with the cultivation method, but the burning scripture that you cultivated was not complete? Ling Xiao smiled faintly. Qing Feng's face turned pale instantly. He stared blankly at Ling Xiao and saw the mockery in the young man's eyes. At this moment, he seemed to have returned to the time when he had just entered the Holy Fire sect. At that time, except for his master, almost everyone in the sect looked at him with the same attitude. Indifferent, arrogant, and disdainful. Burning scripture. How could he know the name burning scripture? One must know that when his master died, he was the only one by his side. Even now, everyone knew that Ling Chen had created a cultivation technique that could fuse with the spirit fire of heaven and earth to cultivate. However, after his unexpected death, no one dared to rashly try it again. If Qing Feng had not tried it himself, no one in the Holy Fire sect would have remembered this cultivation method. Even so, Qing Feng still claimed the burning scripture as his own and never taught it to anyone else, citing his master's last words. In that case, where did the young master of the Ling people learn the name of this technique? Moreover, after all these years of research, Qing Feng indeed felt that the burning scripture he cultivated was not complete. It was missing the most crucial part. However, no matter how hard he searched, he could not find the remaining remnant of the cultivation technique. With his talent, it was impossible for him to perfect this technique. Therefore, he had to endure the pain of the spiritual fire burning his body. What are you saying? I don't understand. Although Qing Feng had many doubts in his heart, his expression remained calm. Ling Chen was the most monstrous talent in the Sacred Fire sect in the past 100,000 years. Even now, many elders in the Sacred Fire sect still regarded him as their idol. Furthermore, the reason why Huiyan valued him so much was largely because he was Ling Chen's only disciple. Once the matter of him personally causing the death of his master was exposed, his fate today would not be as simple as death. It's okay if you don't understand. I'm guessing that there must be the truth in Senior Brother Cheng's soul-seized memory. Why don't I let everyone see for themselves what exactly happened back then? Ling Zhao's expression was calm, but his words caused the expressions of all the powerful cultivators in the hall to change. Everyone had their own opinions about the young master of the Ling people. He was gentle, humble, and decisive in killing. His gentleness was benevolence and loyalty to the common people, to his lovers, and to his followers. It was not to be assumed that the young master of the Ling people was not a coward. The Holy Spirit Crown Prince Jiying, the Shi family's monstrous talent Shi Haotian, and the Shao clan's young master Xiao Moi were all killed by him personally. The three of them were all monstrous talents of the Qing Song Hundred and had powerful backgrounds. Even so, offending Ling Xiao was still a road to death. What? Ling Xiao, you're overbearing. Qing Feng's face turned pale. What was the difference between forcibly searching one's soul and killing? However, if Ling Xiao insisted on doing so, he knew that the Sacred Fire sect could not stop him. Young master, you can't. In the end, Huiyan took a step forward with a gloomy expression and stood in front of Ling Xiao. At this moment, the Sacred Fire sect's master was also confused and surprised. With Ling Xiao's status, there was no need for him to humiliate Qing Feng like this. If he really offended him, he could just kill him directly. No one would dare to say anything. What was the purpose of his actions today? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. Huiyan's face turned pale and he bowed deeply. Young master, although I don't know how Qing Feng offended you, please rest assured that I will discipline him strictly. Master Hua, you've misunderstood. Ling Xiao sighed softly and a solemn expression appeared on his face. To be honest, I've seen Senior Ling Chen and personally sent him into the samsara. What? In an instant, the Sacred Fire sect was in an uproar. All the disciples and elders looked at Ling Xiao in disbelief. They were obviously shocked by what he had just said. In particular, Qing Feng's legs trembled and he almost fell to the ground. When Ling Chen died, his body was burned by the spiritual fire. However, before he died, he swore that he would regret what he had done today. Originally, Qing Feng thought that it was his resentment before he died. He did not expect that today his words would come true. You said you've seen Senior Ling Chen and killed him with your own hands? Huiyan swallowed hard and looked at Ling Xiao in a daze. Young master, should I say that you're domineering or honest? That's right. When I first met Elder Ling, he was only left with a wisp of his remnant soul. He was hiding in a spiritual treasure and was in a miserable state. Ling Xiao sighed. His eyes were solemn and filled with vicissitudes of life. He gave off a sorrowful feeling. At that time, I didn't understand what was supporting him to prolong his feeble existence like an animal until he told me about his experience. What? Senior Ling Chen, what did he say? Huiyan's face was filled with anger. If Senior Brother Ling Chen's death was really related to something else, then there was no need for anyone else to make a move. He would kill Qing Feng with a single palm strike. He said that he died miserably because he was betrayed by his disciple. He was unwilling to accept it. Now, he was only alive because someone could inherit his unique skill and avenge him one day. Ling Xiao was not making this up. Elder Ling chose Lin Shi because he liked the young man's character. The master and disciple were supposed to work together and walk a good path. However, because they met Ling Xiao, they became suspicious of each other and went to the netherworld together. What? This? Qing Feng. What the hell is going on? Huiyan's face was gloomy. He turned to Qing Feng and shouted angrily. Master! Don't listen to his nonsense. Master Ling Chen is my benefactor. How could I harm him? Qing Feng's tone was panicked and his mind was in a mess. Haha, I knew you wouldn't admit it, Meng Er. Chapter 1146. Young Master. Lin Meng, who was dressed in a red robe, walked to Ling Xiao's side with light steps. When I met Elder Ling's remnant soul, he knelt at my feet and begged me to accept his inheritance. However, I rejected him. Ling Xiao looked up at the sky. His eyes were filled with vicissitudes. I knew that once I accepted his inheritance, I would have to shoulder the responsibility of revitalizing the Sacred Fire sect. Unfortunately, my identity was special and I could not fulfill his dream. Therefore, I accompanied him and found a new disciple. As a reward, Elder Ling gave me the blazing scripture. What? Young master is righteous. Hearing this, the Sacred Fire sect's elders were in awe. Who in the world could reject the inheritance of an alchemy fire genius? Moreover, this genius had already passed away. Only a remnant soul was left. Even if Ling Xiao snatched the inheritance, no one would know. However, our righteous Lord Ling Xiao did not take advantage of the situation. Instead, he helped senior brother Ling Chen find a new disciple. This kindness could be said to be a new lease on life for the Sacred Fire sect. Lord Ling Xiao, you are so righteous. Unknowingly, many Sacred Fire sect's elders' faces were filled with tears. It turned out that there was such a righteous person in the world. This lady is called Lin Meng. She is Elder Ling's successor. In his eyes, she is also the opportunity to revitalize the Sacred Fire sect. Ling Xiao nodded at Lin Meng, and the latter immediately understood. She stretched out her hand, and a wisp of red flame immediately bloomed. The terrifying heat almost burned the surrounding space into nothingness. This is a heaven and earth spirit fire. This young lady's body has also merged with a heaven and earth spirit fire. Instantly, the entire Sacred Fire sect went crazy. In this world, there were people who could merge with a heaven and earth spirit fire. However, those people were all giants with supreme cultivation. They used their own spiritual energy to suppress the power of the heaven and earth spirit fire. That was why they could control the extreme heat in this world. But how old was Lin Meng? Based on her physique, she was only a little over 20 years old, yet she was already an expert at the Exalt realm. Moreover, she had even merged with a spirit flame of the heavens and the earth. Such accomplishments could be said to be unprecedented. Comparing the two, Cheng Feng seemed to be trash. Cheng Feng shuddered when he saw the disdain in the eyes of the elders and disciples around him. It was back. Everything was back. This familiar feeling of being looked down upon. Although the blazing scripture created by Master Lingchen can fuse with the spiritual fire, it doesn't mean that only the blazing scripture can fuse with the spiritual fire. If anyone who can fuse with the spiritual fire can become the young master of my Sacred Fire sect, my Sacred Fire sect will probably be very lively in the future. Cheng Feng snorted coldly. At this point, he could only resort to sophistry and gamble with the future of his sect in order to save his life. Then tell me, how can we prove that Meng is cultivating the complete burning scripture? Ling Xiao smiled. To him, Cheng Feng could be killed with a wave of his hand. But today, he came to the Sacred Fire sect not only to kill people, but also to push Lin Meng to the position of young master. As such, once she becomes a saint, this house will completely fall into the hands of Ling Xiao. The cultivation method created by my master can not only fuse with the spiritual fire of heaven and earth, but also fuse multiple spiritual fires into one's body to increase one's cultivation. She only has one spiritual fire in her body. How can we prove that she has cultivated the blazing scripture? At this point, Cheng Feng thought that even if Lin Meng was cultivating the blazing scripture, the spiritual fire of heaven and earth was a treasure of heaven and earth. He had been secretly searching for it all these years but could not find any trace of it. As long as he could drive away the young master of the Ling people today, he would leave the Sacred Fire sect tomorrow with the excuse of going down the mountain to gain experience. At that time, there would be no need to worry about not having a foothold in this vast world. Oh, that's easy. Ling Xiao smiled warmly and fixed his gaze on Cheng Feng. Easy? Suddenly, Cheng Feng felt a chill rising from the bottom of his feet. He looked at Ling Xiao in shock. You? What are you trying to do? What do you think? Ling Xiao suddenly pressed out his palm. Vast divine power began to fluctuate, as if the power of heaven was crashing down on Cheng Feng. You! Cheng Feng's face instantly turned pale. Emerald blue flames swept out from his body, burning the sky and destroying everything. There seemed to be the sound of waves. The entire void surged like the sun and the galaxy fell. The extreme star sea flame was the spiritual fire of heaven and earth that Elder Ling had found in the deep sea. This fire was extremely mysterious. Not only did it contain the heat of fire, but it also contained the vast divine power of the sea of stars. Now that Cheng Feng had used all his strength, Even Hui Yan and the others were stunned. Ling Zhao's talent was unique in the world. However, he was only a young man in his early 20s. No matter how strong his cultivation was, how could he compare to Qing Feng, who had cultivated for 600 years? Therefore, Ling Zhao's figure was swallowed by the flames in an instant. Oh no! Protect Lord Ling Xiao. Hui Yan frowned. Although Ling Zhao's actions just now were indeed a little unreasonable. However, if the young master of the Ling clan were to hurt even a hair on his sacred fire sect today, his sect would be completely destroyed in a short while. However, just as Hui Yan's figure soared into the sky and was about to enter the sea to save Qing Feng, an extreme aura of the great Tao suddenly surged in the layers of flames. Buzz! A lightning palm print appeared in the sky and smashed down with a force that could suppress eternity. At this moment, even the many saints present felt that time and space were slightly distorted. In the cracks in space, countless strange phenomena began to rise and evolve. The primordial world changed, heaven and earth turned upside down, and the universe was no longer there. A tall and slender figure finally slowly walked out from the depths of the spiritual fire. Along the way, the spiritual fire in the sky took the initiative to retreat to the side, as if it had met a terrifying monarch. It faintly revealed a desire to submit. Boom! The lightning palm fell from the sky and crushed Qing Feng's figure to the ground. Within a radius of 1,000 feet, countless cracks appeared on the bluestone plaza. Even though Qing Feng had used the spiritual fire to form an armor at the critical moment, it was still smashed by the palm print. His flesh was shattered and blood was everywhere. Of course, Ling Xiao did not use his full strength in the palm print just now. Otherwise, with Qing Feng's strength, he would have been smashed to pieces. Around the square, the leaders of the various forces looked at each other. Obviously, they did not expect the young master ceremony to develop to this point. However, Master Ling Xiao was entrusted by Ling Chen to clean up the sect. It was reasonable. Ling Xiao, I'll kill you! The lightning dispersed, and an extremely resentful voice resounded in the square. Soon after, everyone felt an extremely frightening heat stealthily sweep out. Thousands of miles of the void, the flames boiled as if a terrifying attack was secretly brewing. Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at the blue lotus shadow that destroyed the void with a gentle smile, but there was no trace of warmth in his eyes. Chapter 1147. Young Master of the Ling People, you've gone too far. A figure slowly rose into the air and stood above everyone's heads. Qing Feng's robe was already torn apart. Even half of his bones were shattered. He glared angrily at Ling Xiao and the countless elders of the Sacred Fire sect beneath him. Why? Today was supposed to be the day he became the young master of the Sacred Fire sect. But why? Why did all of this have to be destroyed by the young master of the Ling people? Ling Chen, you old bastard. You're dead, but you still want to harm me? Why didn't you teach me the burning scripture and let me try to fuse the first spiritual fire for you? How could there be so many changes? Perhaps we would have led the Sacred Fire sect to the top of the Sacred Fire sect. Ha ha ha, Sacred Fire sect, I didn't betray you. You betrayed me. So, die. Qing Feng took a deep breath. His palms suddenly changed into a series of complicated hand seals. The blue starfire above his head suddenly roared and covered the sky. The starlight was dazzling. The hot and violent aura seemed to have been forcefully fused together. Even the many Saint Realm experts felt frightened at this moment, as if they were on the verge of death. Ling Xiao, this is my own unique skill. I'll let you have a taste of it. Qing Feng smiled eerily and raised his palms to the sky. The spiritual fire there had already gathered into a galaxy. The Tao will flowed and the rules intertwined. It was filled with a destructive aura. Suffer my wrath. Qing Feng's aura was also extremely weak. It was obvious that he had gathered all of his spiritual energy into this move. Then, as his palms pressed down, the vast river of stars suddenly poured down, gushing towards the mountaintop. It swept up the stars in the sky, containing a terrifying flame power that could destroy an entire world. Boom, boom! The world shook, and an ear-piercing buzzing sound echoed in all directions. Just a wisp of spiritual energy was enough to shatter the surrounding mountains into nothingness. The void collapsed, and terrifying gullies spread out. In an instant, the entire sacred fire sect was in a state of panic. Just as Huiyen and the other Sage Realm elders were about to take action, they saw Ling Zhao's figure take a step forward and appear under the galaxy. At this moment, his expression was extremely calm. His eyes were indifferent as he raised his head to look at the sea of stars that covered the sky. The attack was obviously similar to the Buddhist lotus. It suppressed the violent aura in the spiritual fire and unleashed the fire's power to the maximum. Unfortunately, Ching Feng did not have much talent. No matter how violently the sea of stars tumbled, its power was already scattered. He stretched out his finger and gently waved it toward the sky. Buzz! Between heaven and earth, the cry of a sword suddenly resounded. Expanses of Taoist rhymes coiled around Ling Zhao's body, and that strand of sword radiance was like the first ray of light in the depths of the chaos. It pierced through the heavens and the earth, pierced through the sea, and annihilated everything. Whoosh! The void shattered. At this moment, Ling Zhao's entire being was emitting an extreme light. It was as though he was a sun that was rising from the sea of stars. His black robe was peerless, and his celestial face was gentle. Endless strange phenomena appeared around the young man, as though he was the creator of the world, and was about to judge the sins of the world. Rip! Before the gloominess on Ching Feng's face dissipated, he suddenly froze on the spot. The boiling sea of stars was suddenly torn apart from the middle. That beam of sword radiance, which was not considered dazzling to begin with, destroyed the blue sky with an unparalleled force. How is this possible? Ching Feng lowered his head and looked at the black-robed young man who was walking toward him step by step. At this moment, he only felt cold all over. He did not even have the courage to escape. Elder Ling said that he wanted me to clean up the sect for him. Since you are so stubborn, Ling Zhao's lips curled into a smile. Then, before Ching Feng could react, his figure had passed through space and appeared in front of him. Boom! Then, Ling Zhao stretched out his hand and directly inserted it into Ching Feng's elixir sea, and pulled hard. Ah! A painful scream resounded. At this moment, all the experts on the sacred fire mountain were shocked to see the icy blue flame in Ling Zhao's hand, and the blood that kept dripping from between his fingers. The world was silent and there was no sound. Ling Zhao lowered his head and looked at Lin Meng, who was in front of the crowd. He waved his hand and threw the starry extreme flame to her. Since some people don't believe me, you can fuse with this flame in front of everyone and prove your identity. Yes, young master. Lin Meng nodded slightly, and there was not a trace of emotion on her face. She was no longer the cowardly girl from the lower realm. She was humble only to her young master. Senior brother Cheng, bear with it. When Meng fuses with the spiritual flames, I will send you to the Western Paradise. Ling Zhao's tone was calm, but the coldness in his words made Huiyen and the others' expressions change. However, at this moment everyone was curious. Could a girl in the venerable realm really fuse two spiritual flames into her body? Ling Chen's attainment in the Tao of Fire was indeed unique. Others might not know, but as his junior brother, Huiyen had long known that he was studying a kind of cultivation method. He used the ancient scripture as a contract to fuse the spiritual flames of heaven and earth to cultivate. However, this method was dangerous. Not to mention those in the Venerable Realm or the Saint Realm, even Supreme Being experts could be burned to ashes if they were not careful. Moreover, the spiritual flames of heaven and earth contained extremely violent power. Some of them even had spiritual intelligence. One could imagine the danger of fusing them into one by force. However, at this moment, Ling Xiao did not look too worried. Lin Meng's physique was special. She was a great spiritual fire body, and she was born with an affinity for fire. Before she cultivated the blazing scripture, she could fuse a spiritual flame into her body. Now that she had entered the venerable realm, fusing with the starry extreme flame was naturally not a problem. Time passed slowly. When the two colors around the girl began to fuse, the entire sacred fire sect suddenly burst into an uproar. At this moment, the scarlet and icy blue colors merged into one and turned into a faint purple color. Lin Meng's aura suddenly rose at this moment. She actually succeeded. God bless our sacred fire sect. Countless elders were shocked, and a look of ecstasy unconsciously appeared on their faces. Since Lin Meng was Ling Chen's disciple, she was also the successor of the sacred fire sect. With her talent, the sacred fire sect only needed to find her a spiritual flame of heaven and earth. Sooner or later, she would enter the supreme being level or even higher. In this way, the sacred fire sect would not be worried about its prosperity. A supreme being who had fused with several spiritual flames. Just thinking about it made people tremble. Moreover, this girl was personally brought to the sacred fire mountain by the young master of the Ling people. With her relationship with Ling Xiao, his fortune, this was a heaven-defying fortune. How is this possible? Qing Feng staggered and suddenly collapsed to the ground. However, at this moment, there was no trace of fear on his face. Only endless resentment was left. Ling Chen, you really looked down on me. You didn't teach me the real blazing scripture until your death. You deserve to die. Chapter 1148. Puqi. Just as Qing Feng finished speaking, Ling Xiao suddenly stretched out his hand and smashed the head of the former young master of the sacred fire sect into pieces. Then, he turned to look at Hui Yen and the others, and said in a gentle tone, "Sect leader Huo, please forgive me. I hate traitors the most in my life. Previously, I promised Elder Ling that I would clean up the traitors for him and send Meng Er safely to the sacred fire sect. Now that my mission has been accomplished, if you still don't believe me, I have nothing to say. Meng Er, come with me. Ling people never reject evildoers." With that, Ling Xiao turned around and walked down the mountain. "Master Ling Xiao. Young master, please wait." Seeing this, Hui Yen and the other experts of the sacred fire sect were shocked and quickly stopped Ling Xiao. "Young master, are you kidding me? Our young master has been killed by you and our only spiritual fire has been taken away by you. You want to leave just like that? Young master, today I have seen how righteous you are. It's funny that I thought Qing Feng was the key to the prosperity of the sacred fire sect." Hui Yen shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Young master, today is the young master ceremony of the sacred fire sect. How about this? I will take Miss Lin Meng as my personal disciple and appoint her as the young master of the sacred fire sect. What do you think?" "Haha, Master Hua, you are too polite. How can I, an outsider, interfere in the affairs of the sacred fire sect? Lin Meng is Elder Ling's disciple. No matter what position she has in the sacred fire sect in the future, she will always be my friend. This will never change." Ling Xiao smiled faintly. Although he mentioned this casually, the masters of the Tianyan region had engraved it in their hearts. It seemed that they had to suck up to Miss Lin in the future. Maybe one day she would be fated to be with the young master, and they could also rise to the heavens with her. Yes, young master sent Lin Meng back to the sect from afar. We should thank you for your kindness. Hui Yen laughed. With the strength of the sacred fire sect, it was usually difficult for them to catch the attention of the Ling people. But today, Ling Xiao had made his stance clear. Wasn't he secretly helping the sacred fire sect to stabilize its reputation? Although the sacred fire sect was one of the most powerful sects in the Tianyan domain, There were still a few sects that pretended to be obedient but opposed in secret. But now, with the relationship between Ling Xiao and Lin Meng, do you think they will rush here overnight to lick the sacred fire sect's boots? Everyone, today is the day that our sacred fire sect's young master, Lin Meng, is born. To celebrate this, we must get drunk for 3 days. With a wave of Huiyan's hand, countless disciples walked over from the edge of the square, carrying immortal spirit fruits and placing them in front of the crowd. Young lord, please. Huiyan welcomed Ling Xiao back to the table, picked up the wine cup, and drained it in one gulp. Meanwhile, the other sect masters of the realm of Heaven Flame also took the opportunity to approach Ling Xiao and flatter him. After a banquet, everyone returned home after enjoying themselves to the fullest. On the second day, when the sky had just brightened, a golden dragon jade carriage suddenly cut across the sky and headed toward the center of the Azure Mountain. At the peak of the sacred Fire Mountain, Lin Meng was dressed in red. She was tall and graceful. The mountain wind blew and lifted her hair, but it couldn't hide the sadness in her eyes. She never dared to disobey Ling Xiao's decision. This was because Aunt Xianyuan had once said that if she wanted to stay by his side, she had to be someone who was useful to him. Disciple, so you are here. In the ancient forest, Huiyan walked over with a sincere smile on his face. In his opinion, Lin Meng's talent was unprecedented. Even compared to the Azure Mountain sequence, she was not inferior at all. The Sacred Fire sect only needed to hibernate for 100 years. When this woman's cultivation reached a certain level, she would definitely be able to intimidate the Azure Mountain. Disciple, a few patriarchs of the Sacred Fire sect want to see you. Master, I need the heaven and earth spirit fire. The more the better. Lin Meng turned around. The sadness on her pretty face had already dissipated, leaving only endless indifference. The young master had sent her here so that she could use the foundation of the Sacred Fire sect as a contract to improve her cultivation as much as possible. One day, when she was unrivaled in the Azure Mountain, she could naturally return to the young master's side. Good. Disciple, don't worry. I will order all the elders of the Saint Stage to go down the mountain and find the heaven and earth spirit fire for you. No, ask the patriarchs to go too. Huiyan looked excited. The harder Lin Meng worked, the faster the Sacred Fire sect would prosper. In the end, the Sacred Fire sect would dominate the world in his hands. At the same time, in the void thousands of miles away, Ling Xiao sat on the carriage and gently swirled the jade cup in his hand. By his side, Xianyuan Weiyang stared at him with reverence, and her eyes were filled with admiration. The young master was a man who kept his promises. For the promise, he did not hesitate to travel thousands of miles to protect Miss Lin Meng. Although he was a little cruel sometimes, those people were all bad people. They were devils. What are you looking at? Ling Xiao smiled gently and raised his head to take a sip of wine. Before leaving, he took almost all of the divine wine brewed by the Sacred Fire sect. Needless to say, the Sacred Fire sect was indeed a master of both alchemy and fire. The spiritual power contained in the divine wine alone was comparable to that of an ordinary grade 4 or 5 pill. Young master, where are we going next? Xianyuan Weiyang rested her chin on her hand. Now that she was close to Ling Xiao, she was not shy at all. In fact, the young master had a very pleasant smell. It was the smell of sunshine. There is less than a month until the day of the Dao Heaven Manor Lord's lecture. Let's go back to the Ling people and rest for 2 days. It's time to set off. Ling Zhao's eyes flashed with a hint of evil. He had been preparing for this game for a long time. Whether it was Yang Yuan or Zhang Juji, they would both shine in this grand event of the human race. Moreover, ever since Ling Xiao saw Li Jichu, he had some guesses. Perhaps there was another son of destiny standing beside this daughter of Providence. And her luck most likely came from this. The academy had always been a good place to show off. However, He did not know what kind of son of Providence he would encounter this time. It was not until a buzzing sound came from his soul that Ling Zhao's eyes trembled. He sent a voice transmission with his divine soul. Double Shadow, what's the matter? Master, I've found out. It's said that Prime Qing Mu lives in seclusion on an ancient mountain called the Heaven and Earth Tower. However, according to my investigation, the Heaven and Earth Tower has been sealed by a Dao technique. Even the Thunder Dragon clan lord returned a few days ago without success. An expert living in seclusion? It's fine. Leave a few secret guards to keep an eye on the mountain. Come back, Ling Xiao said indifferently, but there was a hint of a smile between his brows. The Thunder Dragon Lord must have known about Lei Yun's death, but there was no news from the demon realm. It seemed that the Thunder Dragon Lord was extremely cautious and wanted to secretly investigate the truth of the matter. However, as Lei Yun's master, Prime Qing Mu chose to live in seclusion at this time. There must be some secrets that no one knew. The demon realm revered and lived in seclusion. It was very obvious that this exalted Cyan would possess an extraordinary background. But, no matter what, Zhang Jiuji was already in a panic and did not dare to show his true face. This gave Ling Xiao a chance to set up a chess game. Chapter 1149. That's right. My lord, I've found out that Supreme Greenwood has taken in 6 disciples. They have all entered the world to cultivate. Lei Yun and Zhang Jiuji are going to Dao Heaven City to look for second senior sister, Hua Mingxi. Layered Shadow's voice came from his soul sea. Ling Zhao's eyes flashed with a smile. Sure enough, according to the usual routine, a Tianming like Zhang Jiuji would have several beautiful senior sisters with different backgrounds standing behind him. Lei Yun was the young mistress of the Thunder Dragon clan, one of the 10 clans in the demon region. Her power was unparalleled in the southernmost land. Hua Mingxi was the young mistress of the Hua clan, one of the 3 great clans in the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance. It was said that this woman was gentle and kind. Not only was she very talented, but she was also very popular. Almost all the young mistresses of immortal sex and descendants of great clans had to give her some face. The Dao Heaven Palace Master's Lecture was a grand occasion for Qing Tsang. Many geniuses would gather there. Therefore, the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance would hold the 10,000 Talents Banquet in Dao Heaven City every time. They would invite all the geniuses and hold an auction during the banquet. It seemed that the Hua clan was the host of the 10,000 Talents Banquet this time. However, according to Ling Zhao's knowledge, the 3 great clans in the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance were not as harmonious as they seemed on the surface. After all, no matter which faction it was, there would be differences after a long time. When there were differences, there would be ambitions. The bad habit of the human race was that one person could be the king, and 10,000 generals would become bones. Hua Mingxi was very talented and good at managing money. She was the next candidate for the Alliance Master of the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance. However, the Hua clan could only be ranked second among the 3 great clans. Therefore, no matter how hard Hua Mingxi tried, she would only end up as a background. This gave Ling Xiao another opportunity. Temperament like water? Gentle and kind? It was impossible for a young lady who could manage the business alliance in an orderly manner to not be scheming. What businessmen cared about the most was benefits. As long as Ling Xiao could promise her enough benefits, he was not afraid that this young lady would not obey him. Of course, compared to Hua Mingxi, Ling Xiao was more willing to believe in the Lady of Destiny, who had already acknowledged her allegiance. Su Yan was naturally talented in this field. Ling Xiao only needed to give her a stage, and she would definitely shine brightly. I understand. Ling Xiao picked up the jade cup and drank the immortal wine. At this moment, there seemed to be tens of thousands of demonic patterns in his eyes. Immortal splendor danced in his eyes. Not only did they not contradict each other, but they also gave off an indescribable sense of divinity. One day, he would kill until there were no immortals, no demons, and no gods in this world. I am an immortal, a devil, and a god. Buzz! In the vast blue sky, the wind and clouds rose and fell. A faint wisp of blood radiance appeared from the extreme heaven, piercing through the clouds and illuminating the 9 heavens and 10 lands. Souls return, divine fate cast, sky demon appear, 9 heavens disappear. At this moment, on the Tao mountain where the Daotian Academy was located, a figure in white stood with his hands behind his back, looking into the distance. It was a handsome young man with a tall and straight figure. His eyes, in particular, revealed a hint of determination and dominance. I don't believe that a sky demon can dominate all of eternity. Junior brother Lu, so you're here. Soft laughter suddenly came from the forest in the distance. Immediately after, a graceful lady walked over. Her steps were light and graceful, and her pretty face was calm. Senior sisterly. The gloominess on Lu Ming's face was swept away, and a gentle smile appeared on his face. The martial arts competition of the 4 academies is on the eve of the Academy Master's lecture. Junior brother, how are your preparations? Li Jichu was the top disciple of the Confucian Academy and the true prodigy of the Daotian Academy. However, ever since junior brother Lu came up the mountain, she had a strange feeling in the bottom of her heart. Logically speaking, Lu Ming's cultivation level was only at the 5th grade Venerable Realm, the same as hers. However, every time she was in front of this junior brother, she had an inexplicable sense of oppression. It was as if junior brother Lu's true strength had long surpassed hers. He was even comparable to those Sage Realm elders. However, Lu Ming had never made a move all these years. Therefore, even Li Jichu was not clear about his true strength. Lu Ming's name was only left behind when he ascended the mountain ascension step. Even the Academy Master was extremely concerned about this young disciple. Li Jichu guessed that her junior brother might shine in this martial arts competition of the 4 academies. As his name suggested, he might amaze the world with a single brilliant feat and become the top disciple of the Confucian Academy. Senior sister, don't worry. I won't tarnish the reputation of the Confucian Academy. Although Lu Ming's tone was humble, his words revealed an unparalleled dominance. At this moment, there seemed to be an immortal aura lingering around him. It was vast and everlasting, but there was also a kind of Buddha nature that could reach heaven and earth, as well as a faint sense of gloominess. This extremely mysterious power made Li Jichu frown slightly, but she did not ask further. The Daotian Academy taught everyone regardless of background. As long as one was not a demon, no matter where one was from or what one's background was, one could enter the academy to cultivate. In the words of the Daotian Academy's master, even if one had demonic thoughts, after entering the academy, one's soul would be purified by the sages of the human race and be reborn. That's good. When the time comes, I'll introduce you to a gentleman. He's a very gentle gentleman. Li Jichu's eyes flickered with a trace of fascination. Even her pretty face unconsciously curled into a smile. Seeing this scene, Lu Ming frowned deeply. There seemed to be doubts in his eyes. It seemed that ever since senior sister Li returned from the supreme mystic realm, she had been looking troubled. What kind of young master was he, to be able to cause her Tao heart to be bewitched? Senior sister? Although Lu Ming did not deliberately reveal his admiration for Li Jichu, the two of them had the same Tao heart and often discussed Tao and learned from each other. Moreover, Lu Ming had a dignified appearance and was extremely handsome. Li Jichu was also known as the #1 beauty of the 4 academies. Therefore, in the eyes of the disciples of the 4 academies, the two of them could be said to be a match made in heaven. In fact, there were already people who were secretly praising this pair of farts. It was not that Lu Ming did not have a trace of affection for Li Jichu in his heart. It was just that the current him was wholeheartedly pursuing Tao and had the ambition to become an immortal. He did not want to waste time on personal relationship. "Ah, junior brother, I believe that when you meet that gentleman, you will definitely be moved by his righteousness and integrity." Li Jichu smiled bitterly. There was longing in her eyes. "All right, you can cultivate in peace for the next few days. I won't disturb you." With that, Li Jichu turned around and walked into the distance, leaving Lu Ming standing alone on the spot with a grave expression. At this moment, although he did not have much resentment in his heart, he was more or less disappointed and frustrated. Ever since he entered the Confucian Academy, he had been inseparable from Li Jichu. During this period, they had also gone down the mountain to gain experience. They had gone through hardships together and had a deep relationship. But now, although senior sister was still concerned about him, there was an additional politeness that she had never shown him before. This feeling was very bad. It was as if there was a layer of film that separated the two of them. Gentle and righteous gentleman, I wonder who is so lucky to be favored by senior sister. Lu Ming shook his head and smiled, his eyes shining brightly. It seemed that he had to prove himself in this martial arts competition of the 4 academies. Chapter 1150. Time passed quickly, and 10 days passed. In the center of the divine battle domain, the main hall of the divine mountain suddenly opened. A black-robed figure slowly stepped out. Golden patterns flowed on his black robe, releasing endless divine light. On that gentle face, there was a faint and clean smile. "Young master." Xianyuan Weiyang and Jin Han'er had been waiting for a long time. Yao Guang stood in the distance with one hand in front of him and softly chanted a Buddhist chant. She had to admit that even though she had a grudge and cultivated a Buddhist nature, she still felt a ripple in her heart when she saw his face. It was a sin. It was a sin. Could it be that she really couldn't overcome this tribulation? Let's go. There are still a few days before the Tao Heaven Academy Master's Lecture. I'm afraid the Tao Heaven City is already bustling with noise and excitement. Ling Zhao's eyes were clear and cold. He stepped into the void, and a golden dragon divine shadow immediately floated in the air and drove the chariot over. Bodhisattva. Ling Xiao turned around and glanced at Yao Guang, only to see the latter shake his head slightly and walk towards the Tao Heaven City ahead of him. Seeing this, Ling Zhao's eyes flashed with a sinister light. After he was done with the matters of the Daotian Academy, it was time to take a stroll in the extreme lightning place. A few days ago, Wu Nye had already sent back news that he had successfully found the first spy that the Western Buddha Lord had placed in an ancient mountain. Next, Ling Xiao only needed to quietly wait for him to find the other two and step on the journey to the Western Paradise. No, the journey to the extreme lightning place. Then, he could crush Yao Guang's Tao heart again. However, whether this bodhisattva would die this time would depend on whether she had any value in living. She was born with a Buddhist nature and a demonic nature. Perhaps this Yao Guang's identity would have some unexpected surprises. Let's go. As Ling Xiao beckoned with his hand, Jin Han'er finally dared to step onto the jade chariot. She sat beside Ling Xiao and carefully moved her body until she gently leaned against his arm. Xianyuan Weiyang's beautiful brows knit together lightly when she saw this scene. She was just about to lean closer to Ling Xiao when she recalled the bowl of dragon soup from a few days ago, and her heart instantly jerked while she sat upright in a proper manner. The image of a dragon floated across the blue sky for thousands of miles. Ling Xiao, on the other hand, was leaning on the jade chariot, drinking wine and admiring the clouds. He had been looking forward to this trip for a long time, but at the same time, he was secretly on guard. After all, what he had to face was not only Yang Yuan and Zhang Juji, but also the Lord of Daotian Prefecture. There was no one in the entire Azure continent who didn't know this human race's saint. Although his cultivation was only at the heavenly sovereign realm, his understanding of the Tao was not something that ordinary Supreme Being experts could compare to. Some people said that the Lord of Daotian Prefecture was the reincarnation of a saint and that he was the true destiny of the human race. Of course, Ling Xiao did not believe such rumors. On the path to immortality, everyone fought to cross it. Although the ancient saints had the magnificent feat of sealing the heavens with the blood of the human emperor, in the end, the human emperor was remembered by the world because he had fought against the immortals alone and had a supreme cultivation. It was not because he was righteous. Strength was the only opportunity to become immortal. The Lord of Daotian Prefecture's great ambition was indeed awe-inspiring. However, if he was the reincarnation of an ancient saint, why didn't he go against the heavens and kill the immortals? Wouldn't that be more direct? At the very least, the Azure Continent should not be suppressed by a Lord of Daotian Prefecture for 100,000 years. The destiny of the human race should not be destroyed. Therefore, no matter what the Lord of Daotian Prefecture was scheming, in Ling Xiao's opinion, he was not as desireless as the world said. Among the opponents that Ling Xiao had faced in the past, Ancestor Yi was indeed very scheming. However, compared to the human race saint, he was slightly inferior. After all, Yi Luoyun had already fallen to the Supreme Being realm and lost the foundation of a Supreme Being. On the other hand, the Lord of Daotian Prefecture was at least a heavenly sovereign. Moreover, he was a heavenly sovereign who stood at the top of the Azure Continent. Ling Xiao could not afford to be careless when competing with such a person. Young master, I heard that every time the Lord of Daotian Prefecture gives a lecture, the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance will hold a 10,000 Geniuses banquet. Xianyuan Weiyang looked expectant, but Ling Xiao shook his head slightly. Although the Lord of Daotian Prefecture's lecture was a grand occasion in the Azure Continent. However, in Ling Xiao's opinion, those who were truly talented and blessed by the heavens might not even waste their time to join in the fun. After all, those who were destined to become immortals had to train themselves in killing. Moreover, they had awakened their golden fingers. Although the Lord of Daotian Prefecture was a heavenly sovereign and had a deep understanding of the Great Path, his Tao might not be suitable for everyone. Therefore, most of those who came to listen to the Lord of Daotian Prefecture's lecture were those whose cultivation was shackled, their Tao hearts were impure, or those who had ulterior motives. Of course, apart from Yang Yuan and Zhang Juji, Ling Xiao had profited from every single person who appeared in Daotian City. As for Hua Mingxi from the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance, Ling Xiao was looking forward to meeting her. I heard that Hua Mingxi from the Hua family is the host of the 10,000 Geniuses banquet this time. Jin Han turned to look at Ling Xiao with a bright smile. I am quite familiar with her. If you need, I can introduce her to you. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and sipped the wine in his cup. How much do you know about the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance? The Heavenly Saint Business Alliance? As far as I know, the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance is an alliance of 3 clans. They are jointly in charge. After hundreds of thousands of years, the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance controls almost all the auction houses in the Qing-Tsang continent. They are extremely wealthy, but Jin Han wanted to say something but stopped. When she saw the coldness in Ling Xiao's eyes, she gritted her teeth and said softly, "But now, the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance is not very stable internally." Of course, she had heard all this from Hua Mingxi. If it had been in the past, Jin Han would not have betrayed the young master of the Hua family. However, the Golden Crow Holy Dynasty had already submitted to her master. All she could do was to help her master reach the peak of the Qing-Tsang continent. Nothing else mattered. Go on. Ling Xiao smiled. Hua Mingxi was going to be an important part of his next plan. No matter how confident Ling Xiao was, as long as someone or force was targeted by him, they would not be able to escape. However, confidence was one thing. If he wanted to be flawless, he had to be cautious. The Heavenly Saint Business Alliance is ranked second among the 3 clans. The one ranked above the Hua family is the Lu family. The one ranked last is the Su family. However, in the past 1,000 years, the Su family has declined. The people of the main branch either died accidentally or had no talent. I'm afraid it won't be long before this clan completely loses the foundation of the business alliance. I once heard Ming Shi say that not only the Su family, but even the Hua family also suspected that the Lu family was behind all of this. Their goal was to forcefully swallow the Su family and monopolize them so that they could completely control the merchant alliance. However, there was no evidence. All these years, she was also on tenterhooks and anxious. Jean Hon'er smiled bitterly. This was a secret conversation between her and Hua Mingxi. Now that she said it to Ling Xiao, she felt a little complicated and ashamed. However, with her master's character, after knowing about Mingxi's predicament, he might help her to get through it. After all, her master was a gentle and righteous person. All kinds of practitioners were either in groups of 3 or 5 or walking alone. Have you heard? During the competition of the 4 academies in the Daotian Academy, a young disciple by the name of Lu Ming shocked the world with a single brilliant feat. He defeated a group of geniuses who were at the 6th or 7th level of the Venerable Realm. Hey, didn't you hear? The real geniuses of the 4 academies didn't participate in the competition at all. Senior brother Dao Wuya from the Dao College has been cultivating in seclusion. If senior brother Dao Wuya took action, Lu Ming wouldn't have the chance to show off. That's true. Now that the Dao Heaven Manor Lord is about to give a lecture, the real geniuses of the 4 academies have all spent their energy on the few trials that are about to begin. Only someone like Lu Ming, who is greedy for fame, would show off. I heard that the final battle of the 4 academies will be held on the eve of the Dao Heaven Manor Lord's lecture. By then, I'd like to see how powerful Lu Ming is. There was a lot of discussion in Dao Heaven City. On the old street, an ordinary-looking young man dressed in linen blended in with the crowd, carefully listening to the movements in Dao Heaven City. Zhang Jiuji had already changed his appearance. There was a violent aura exuding from his body, giving people a terrifying sense of oppression. Of course, if it were in the past, this kind of aura might attract some attention. However, there were many geniuses gathered in Dao Heaven City, and even some descendants of hidden sects had appeared. As for someone dressed in plain clothes like Zhang Jiuji, no matter how strong his aura was, it would be difficult for him to attract too much attention. I wonder where 5th Senior Sister is now. Forget it, I'll go to the Heavenly Sacred Business Alliance to look for 2nd Senior Sister. Given her background, it'll naturally be easier to find 5th Senior Sister. Zhang Jiuji looked bitterly at the crowd in front of him. This was the first time he had seen so many cultivators in his life. There was a crowd of people, and there was no lack of people with powerful auras. It was no different from a fool's dream to find Lei Yun among so many cultivators. Furthermore, the 2 of them had just been intercepted. He was afraid that 5th Senior Sister must have disguised herself and blended in with the crowd like him. With that thought in mind, Zhang Jiuji no longer hesitated and strode toward the center of Dao Heaven City. The 10,000 Talents Banquet was also a grand event. A group of talented geniuses with powerful backgrounds gathered together. What did they want to do the most? Of course, it was to show off. They wanted to see who could show off more naturally. Therefore, every time the Banquet of Heaven's Favorites is held, it is a huge scene of face-slapping. Some people became famous because of it and gained the favor of many geniuses, while others were destined to become a laughing-stock and run away. Regardless, before the Daotian Academy officially opened, the 10,000 Talents Banquet was still the most anticipated event in everyone's hearts. Look, what's that? Just then, a commotion broke out in the crowd. Immediately after, waves of cheers resounded through the clouds. It was extremely shocking. Zhang Jiuji frowned slightly and looked into the distance. There, he saw a flowery sedan being carried by 4 people. It was flying over from the sky. Celestial mist swirled around it, and it was as graceful as a swan. From afar, it looked like a celestial flower had descended to the mortal world. There was a faint fragrance that filled the air, causing one's heart to feel relaxed and happy. At this moment, although the flower sedan was covered with a veil, it could not block everyone's sight. One of them was a woman in a white dress who sat cross-legged quietly. Her fine black hair flowed down like a waterfall, her face was like jade, her skin was like cream, and her eyebrows were like leaves. The thin corners of her mouth were curled up into a faintly discernible arc, giving others an extremely warm and amiable feeling. It's the Flower Fairy's flower sedan. The Flower Fairy is here. Flower Fairy, I love you. I'm your bootlicker. The entire Daotian city instantly fell into an uproar. Zhang Juji's eyes also flashed with a hint of surprise. Clearly, he did not expect this second senior sister's appearance to be so otherworldly. It was only when the flower sedan descended from the sky and landed in front of a magnificent ancient palace in the city that Hua Mingxi stepped out of the sedan and waved at the countless geniuses rushing over. Under the sunlight, that jade-like hand was slender and fair, and it immediately caused some of the eccentric disciples to tremble. Zhang Juji squeezed through the crowd and was about to walk towards Hua Mingxi when countless palms suddenly landed on his shoulder. Before he could react, he was thrown out. Where did this idiot come from? Don't you know that you have to line up to see the Flower Fairy? How rude. Miss Hua. Love you, love you. Plop. Zhang Juji's figure landed on the ground with a blank expression. However, when he saw that Hua Mingxi was about to enter the palace, his eyes narrowed. His entire body suddenly turned into a flash of light and rushed towards her. Chapter 1152. Buzz! An ear-piercing buzzing sound resounded through the sky. All the disciples of the immortal sect looked at the figure that was flying through the air in astonishment. Their eyes flashed with shock. Where did this idiot come from? Didn't he know that there was an unwritten rule around the young master of the Hua family? Boom! Just as Zhang Juji was about to land on the ground, the eyes of the 4 servants carrying the carriage shone with divine light. 4 palm prints flew across the sky and pressed down on Zhang Juji. There was a loud boom. Even though Zhang Juji had a divine body, fear flashed across his face. Then, there seemed to be lightning blooming around him, and divine radiance ignited. Then, as everyone expected, his figure fell from the sky and smashed into the square. Poochie! Blood mist rose. Zhang Juji felt as if all his bones were about to shatter. If his physical body had not been tempered by the dark tribulation divine thunder, the 4 palm prints would have killed him on the spot. Of course, even though the situation was critical, Zhang Juji did not dare to use the power of the Yin Moon. This was Dao Heaven City, the city under the saint. If he had a trace of the demonic aura on him, he would be killed on the spot without any explanation. After all, not everyone was as righteous as Lord Ling Xiao. Looking at the young man who stood up shakily from the ground, Hua Mingxi frowned slightly and let out a cry of surprise. She glared at the 4 servants angrily. Did you forget what I said? You are not allowed to fight in Dao Heaven City. Yes, young master. The 4 servants looked calm and bowed slightly. Hua Mingxi took out a white jade bottle from her universe ring and handed it to the servant beside her. Go, give this to this young master. Miss Hua is too kind. The crowd burst into an uproar. Zhang Juji's actions just now were no different from seeking death. How dare he blaspheme the goddess? Even 1,000 cuts would not be enough. But not only was Miss Hua not angry, she even scolded the servants and gave them pills? What was there to say? Brag. Miss Hua, you are too kind. If it was said that the crowd had only looked at Zhang Juji with ridicule and mockery in their eyes earlier, then, at this moment, he was truly filled with hatred. Why? He was just a young man in linen clothes. It was obvious that he had no background and came from a humble background. How could he be favored by the young miss? Just because he was ugly? He was the only one who was outrageous. However, at this moment, Hua Mingxi's eyes flashed with a strange light. Although her 4 palanquin slaves were only at the exalt realm, when the 4 of them attacked together, an ordinary azure sky prodigy would have been crushed. However, the young man in front of him was only slightly injured. Furthermore, it was under the premise that he was caught off guard. When he was in danger just now, there seemed to be a flash of lightning energy on his body. It was common knowledge that Heaven's favorites who cultivated techniques such as lightning and fire had terrifying physical capabilities. The reason why Hua Mingxi was able to achieve her current status was because she was observant and treated people kindly. In other words, if this young man died now, she would definitely not waste this bottle of pills. Today, to be able to use a bottle of dawn to gain the favor of a mysterious Heaven's favorite, why not? Bah! If I had known earlier, I would have pounced on him too. That's right. Young Miss Hua is really kind-hearted. If it were up to me, those 4 servants must have been merciful. Otherwise, how could this young man block their combined attacks? Heh! What a lucky bastard! Around the plaza, everyone's words were vicious. They coldly watched as one of the palanquin slaves walked to Zhang Juji and handed the jade bottle in his hand to him with a cold expression. Young miss has given you a gift. Why aren't you kneeling down and thanking her? Kneel down? Hearing this, Zhang Juji's face suddenly bloomed with a smile. Then, he did not even look at this person. Instead, he looked at Hua Mingxi in the distance. F***CK? What is this idiot doing? I don't think you're that smart. Is there a need to ask? Aren't you just pretending? Seeing this scene, the crowd was in an uproar again. There were even some who could not suppress the anger in their hearts. They rubbed their fists and were ready to teach this arrogant dog a lesson. Hearing the commotion behind her, Hua Mingxi, who was about to enter the ancient palace, suddenly stopped and turned around. She just happened to see Zhang Juji's deep and bright black eyes. For a moment, Hua Mingxi narrowed her eyes. She actually saw a hint of joy and frivolity in his eyes. You're quite ambitious. Is this your first time coming out to the world to train? However, it might not be a good thing in Heaven Dao City. Hua Mingxi smiled sweetly and shook her head slightly. She was about to leave. Over the years, she had seen all kinds of monstrous people. For someone like this linen-clothed young man, it was either his first time coming out to the world or he had great ambitions. However, no matter what, on the path to immortality, there were times when one had to pay a price for being arrogant. Second Sister Hua, I came all the way here. Are you going to ignore me like this? Hearing this, Zhang Juji smiled bitterly and reached out to touch his nose. In the next instant, a domineering look suddenly surged in his eyes. However, at this moment, the surrounding genius's expressions became more and more confused. Second Sister Hua? Is this a new method to worm his way into being friends? I've never heard of Hua Mingxi having an elder brother or sister. Bootlicker. This young man is a bootlicker. However, just as everyone's expression was sullen and they were about to start a new round of ridicule and scolding, in front of the main hall, Hua Mingxi's pretty face suddenly froze. Then, her jade-like hand gently covered her red lips. She looked at the exceptionally tall young man in linen clothes with a face of disbelief. At this moment, there were still bloodstains at the corner of his mouth. However, the smile on his face was as bright as the morning sun. You are. Hua Mingxi took a step forward. Her body turned into a graceful swan, leaving a fragrance in the air. Her beautiful figure had already arrived beside Zhang Juji. You are. Sixth brother? All these years, although she had not returned to the Heaven and Earth Imperial Palace to visit her master, she had heard from the other senior sisters that her master had taken in a new junior brother. His life was miserable, and he was very protective of him. Moreover, outsiders did not know that she had taken in a master at all. In addition, her master, Qing Mu, was indifferent and did not care about worldly affairs. Therefore, the 5 sisters had never done anything in the name of their master when they traveled the world. There was no one else in the world who could call her second sister other than her junior brother. "It's me, second sister." Zhang Juji smiled playfully. A gentle look immediately appeared on Hua Mingxi's face. "Come quickly. Let's talk inside." "Okay." The two of them walked side by side into the ancient palace. At this moment, the entire square was already dead silent. Everyone looked at the young man who had his head held high and his chest puffed out like a little rooster. Then, they looked at the bright smile on Hua Mingxi's face, and did not know what to say for a moment. Damn it! This time, he actually succeeded in pretending. "But let's talk inside? How do we go in? Where do we go in?" Inexplicably, a strong sense of jealousy and hatred grew in the hearts of many geniuses. Chapter 1153. Junior Brother, it's really you? In the grand hall of the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance, Hua Mingxi looked Zhang Juji up and down with a smile. At this moment, the young man waved his hand and took off the mask on his face, revealing another, average-looking face. This, Hua Mingxi was confused. Generally speaking, those who showed up with a mask were either extremely beautiful and did not want to cause trouble. For example, the one from the immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty. Before she became the empress, she always covered her face with a white veil and never showed her true face. Even so, there were still countless geniuses from the ancient clans and disciples from the immortal sects who were attracted by her temperament and chased after her for 100 years. It was not until half a year ago, when the young master of the Ling clan appeared and killed a bunch of bootlickers and announced to the world that Gu Chaozi was his fiancée, that the craze for the empress, which had lasted for 200 years, gradually died down. The other was that they made a big mistake and hid with a mask to avoid the disaster. However, it was said that this junior brother had no relatives or friends and had been cultivating with his master. How could he have enemies? Yes, it was very strange. Junior brother Zhang Juji greets second senior sister. Zhang Juji bowed. Although his face was pale, his temperament was flawless. "Junior brother, are you okay?" "Just now, senior sister, don't worry. I'm fine." "Second senior sister, have you seen fifth senior sister?" Zhang Juji shook his head and looked serious. "Fifth junior sister?" "No." "Junior brother, did you come with junior sister Lei Yun?" Hua Mingxi's eyes flashed with confusion. Looking at Zhang Juji's expression, it seemed that he had encountered some difficulties. Back then, she had found out about the existence of this junior brother from Lei Yun. After all, Lei Yun often went to visit her master as the demon clan's master who lived in seclusion in the far south demon region. However, Lei Yun was the young master of the Thunder Dragon clan and had never stepped into the territory of the human clan. The demon clan had always been united. She should have no enemies. What difficulties could she have encountered? No. Zhang Juji's face turned pale and he felt uneasy. "Junior brother, don't worry. Let's talk about it slowly. Don't worry. I still have some prestige in the Azure world. I won't let you be at a disadvantage." Hua Mingxi took out a bottle of elixir from her universe ring. "Take this elixir first to ease your injuries." "Thank you, second senior sister." Zhang Juji forcefully stabilized his mind before taking out a medicinal pill and placing it into his mouth. He felt a warm flow along his meridians and overflow, whereas the injuries on his body actually recovered at a terrifying speed. Furthermore, at this moment, Zhang Juji could feel that the realm he had just broken through was showing signs of breaking through again. This is a 7th grade spiritual pill. There are 2 more in the bottle. Take them with you. Hua Mingxi smiled. It seemed that in the eyes of ordinary people, these elixirs were nothing more than sugar beans and mud balls, not worth mentioning. Many thanks, senior sister. Zhang Juji's eyes trembled. Only now did he realize that this second senior sister was as rich as the rumors said. All right, tell me, what kind of predicament did you and Lei Yun encounter? Senior sister, fifth senior sister and I came all the way from the demon region. On the way we were ambushed. Fifth senior sister gave me a life-saving talisman to protect me. Zhang Juji clenched his teeth. If Lei Yun had not insisted that she could escape, how could he have left her alone? Now that fifth senior sister's whereabouts were unknown, one could imagine the guilt in his heart. Ambushed? Do you know which force it is? Hua Mingxi's pretty face froze. Even her aura seemed a little gloomy. However, Zhang Juji shook his head. I just came into this world, so I don't know much about the major forces in Qingtsang. However, the woman who tried to kill us had a cold temperament and a mighty immortal aura. Although she also had the aura of an honorable realm, she was able to command 2 Saint Realm experts. Those 2 Saint Realm experts chased after me for a very long distance. Fifth senior sister and that woman were engaged in a fierce battle. As he spoke, that fairy-like figure appeared in Zhang Juji's mind again. Even compared to second senior sister, that female immortal's temperament and the arrogance in her eyes made his heart tremble inexplicably. It was hard to imagine how unparalleled that face under the veil of immortal clouds was. Sometimes, Zhang Juji had an inexplicable impulse. He really wanted to see that female immortal again. It had nothing to do with any grudges. He just wanted to personally unveil her mysterious veil. Cough, cough. Looking at Zhang Juji, who seemed to be in a trance, Hua Mingxi frowned slightly and coughed lightly. A young man who could be chosen by master naturally had a good temperament. However, what kind of woman could make junior brother reveal such an infatuated expression despite being his enemy? Did you see that woman's face clearly? No. At that time, she was covered by the veil of immortal clouds. I couldn't see her face clearly. However, according to my estimation, she should be a woman with a cold temperament and unparalleled beauty. Her eyes were the most brilliant galaxy I have ever seen. Humph. Hua Mingxi snorted coldly and glared at Zhang Juji. No, little junior brother, why are you licking my boots while chatting? Let's not talk about whether Lei Yun is in trouble or not. Since she dared to kill the 2 of you, she must have a motive. With your intelligence, it's fortunate that you ran away quickly. Otherwise, you would have most likely died this time. Senior sister, do you think something will happen to fifth senior sister? Zhang Juji smiled awkwardly. He also felt emotional. If it was before, he had never seen a peerless woman in this world. But now, Lei Yun and Hua Mingxi were both unparalleled. However, they were different. They were completely different. It was a kind of otherworldly aura that was unique in the world. You and Lei Yun agreed to meet at Dao Heaven City? Hua Mingxi pondered. There was a rare trace of seriousness between her brows. Zhang Juji spoke for a long time. She only heard that the woman who tried to kill them was extremely beautiful and had a noble status. Everything else was useless. Not to mention Hua Mingxi, even the young master of World Lord Palace would find it hard to find out. Yes. Fifth senior sister knew that you would come to Dao Heaven City. So, we agreed to meet here. However, I have been secretly investigating for the past few days. I didn't find out anything about her. Zhang Juji sighed. He looked even more anxious. Second senior sister, I have a bad feeling. Don't worry. Lei Yun is the young master of Lightning Dragon Tribe. She must have many life-saving methods. Moreover, if something really happened to her, with Lightning Lord's temper, the entire city should be in an uproar now. Hua Mingxi shook her head. Suddenly, she clapped her hands. Outside the main hall, the 4 sedan slaves immediately walked in. They bowed to Hua Mingxi. Young master, Arrange some people to secretly search for my fifth junior sister, Lei Yun, in Dao Heaven City and the surrounding regions. Also, spread the news that I have arrived in Dao Heaven City. The louder the news, the better. After that, Ada, take my token and personally make a trip to the Lightning Dragon tribe in the extreme south. Go and ask about the Lightning Lord Lei Yun. According to Hua Mingxi's thoughts, even if an honorable realm person had unparalleled battle strength, it was impossible for him to kill Lei Yun easily. At least, if she wanted to leave, no one should be able to stop her. Now that she had just arrived at Dao Heaven City, perhaps Lei Yun would appear soon. Face covered by immortal clouds, temperament cold? A cold and arrogant immortal face flashed across Hua Mingxi's mind. It shouldn't be. This empress had always had no desires. How could she casually kill people? Chapter 1154. Yes, young master. Hua Mingxi heaved a sigh of relief after the 4 servants left. Junior brother, don't be too anxious. I just arrived at Dao Sky City today. Perhaps 5th junior sister will hear the news and come here soon. Thank you, 2nd senior sister. Zhang Jiuji nodded silently. All the prodigies of the Azure continent gathered at the 10,000 talents banquet. I wonder if that fairy will show up? For 3 days in a row, Dao Heaven City was bustling with noise and excitement. Numerous ancient battleships, great demons, and great beasts descended from the sky. Countless geniuses with extraordinary temperaments and vast spiritual auras arrived, causing an uproar. Look, what's that? Heavenly steeds and battle armors descended from the sky in the distance. A group of riders holding black spears and riding black horses descended from the sky, escorting a golden carriage. At the front of the riders was a young man in silver armor and riding a white horse. He had an extraordinary aura and a cold face, but his aura was extremely powerful. He was riding a horse and wearing silver armor and a silver spear. He had black hair and a golden crown, but he gave off an aura that made it seem like an army of 10,000 was no match for him. He looked down on the world with indifference and detachment. The sound of Dao resounded across 30,000 miles, attracting everyone's attention. It's the blood-clad marquis of the Xinwu dynasty. Xin Jinggan. I didn't expect this god of slaughter to come as well. Is that Marquis Shui's fiancée, Princess Wu Hongqiu of the Xinwu dynasty? Hiss. This aura is indeed worthy of the title of the young god of slaughter. The crowd was shocked. Many prodigies from the ancient dynasties and celestial dynasties had a hint of wariness in their eyes. It was hard to imagine that such an elegant and quiet young man would have such a ferocious title. The blood-clad marquis. The young marquis was the youngest person in the history of the Xinwu dynasty to be conferred the title of marquis. He had a powerful background and was said to be from a hidden ancient sect. What was even more frightening was that it was said that he had killed 800,000 people over the years. However, what really made Xin Jing'an's name resound across the Azure continent was that the divine martial crown prince had fallen into a trap when he went to train in the mortal world. He had mobilized the entire world to kill the future leader of the divine martial crown prince. At the critical moment, Xin Jing'an and his spear descended from the sky and killed everyone with his supremacy cultivation. Although the cultivators of the lower realms generally had low cultivation levels, but in that battle there were a total of 60 honorable realm experts who died in Xin Jing'an's hands. The number of other Emperor God experts was uncountable. Furthermore, by the time the experts of the Xinwu dynasty heard the news and rushed over, Xin Jing'an's white robes had already been dyed red. That was how the name Marquis Bloodclad came about. He was the only one in the venerable realm who was bestowed the title of Marquis. The blood-red robe was still hanging in the divine martial emperor palace as a deterrent to traitors. And in order to reward the young Marquis for his courage and decisiveness, the divine martial emperor had even betrothed his eldest daughter. Even though the two of them hadn't held their wedding ceremony yet, in the eyes of outsiders, the two of them were already intertwined, advancing and retreating together, sharing glory and glory together. Of the 18 marquises of the divine martial marquises, he was the most glorious one. Look, why are there 2 suns in the sky? Am I seeing things? Just as Marquis blood-robed and the others landed, the crowd burst into an uproar again. Shinjingan frowned and turned to look at the sky. Sure enough, he saw 2 suns shining brightly in the sky. But one of them was a bright sun that was slightly red in color, while the other was a true golden color. The divine radiance was blinding. It was too terrifying. Just the wisps of light alone had the power to annihilate the sky and shatter mountains and seas. Then, everyone was dumbfounded as they watched the sacred sun fall from the sky, tearing a reddish-gold crack in the void. It was as if a huge star had fallen from the sky. Until the light suddenly stopped, and when the brilliance dissipated, a tall and imposing figure was revealed. It was a young man with a square face and wide eyes. He had an unquestionable majesty. His eyes were like 2 suns, shooting out thousands of rays of golden light. It was to the extent that even his hair was a dazzling golden color that contained an unparalleled divinity. The reddish-gold robe he wore was embroidered with mountains, rivers, sun and moon, which made his figure seem even more sacred and tall. He had the majesty to control all light in the world and punish all darkness. It's the descendant of the Saint Emperor Palace's Yang Emperor, Marquis Xiaoyang. It's Marquis Xiaoyang. I didn't expect him to be born too. The Saint Emperor Palace might not be as famous as the Shenwu dynasty in the eyes of the world, but because the experts of the palace had not been born for a long time, many people thought that they had already declined. It was rumored that this force was first established by the 5 great emperors, and it could be traced back to the human sovereign era. It was undeniable that some of the 5 great emperors might have fallen in the hundreds of thousands of years of inheritance, but as long as one of the 5 was still alive, the Saint Emperor Palace would be the true immortal inheritance of the Qing Tsang. The descendants of the 5 great emperors had awakened their talents and inherited the name of the great emperors. Lord Xiaoyang was the descendant of the Sun Emperor, and he was extremely talented. The Holy Sun body was the best in the world, and the ancestral awakening bloodline was the true bloodline of the great emperors. Now that the world was in chaos, all kinds of monstrous talents were born. Lord Xiaoyang was the most famous monstrous talent in the Saint Emperor Palace, and Wei Wuye could not be compared to him. Lord Xiaoyang. Shen Jingan turned his head and looked at the burly figure. This person had the true blood of the great emperors flowing in his body, and it already had divinity. Although Shen Jingan's combat strength was terrifying and he killed ruthlessly, he was still slightly inferior to Lord Xiaoyang in terms of talent. However, talent was one thing. A true powerhouse grew through slaughter. The so-called holy body and divine body were just natural creations, and they were not powerful in Shen Jingan's eyes. I guess this must be the Princess Royal of the Shenwu Empire, Wu Hongqiu? Lord Xiaoyang did not even look at Shen Jingan, and a smile suddenly bloomed on his face. He waved his hand, and a red divine light suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It turned into a gust of wind and swept toward Wu Hongqiu's sedan. I heard that the Princess Royal is an outstanding beauty. Why don't you let me see if this so-called outstanding beauty is just an undeserved reputation, or if she really has some charm? The Shenwu Empire was also the inheritance of a great emperor, and he was known as the Great Emperor. He was good at killing, and had once suppressed an era. The 5 great emperors of the Saint Emperor Palace were said to have some connections with the ancestor of the Shenwu Empire, and this caused the younger generation to often compete with each other. Lord Xiaoyang was deliberately making things difficult for Wu Hongqiu to intimidate the Shenwu Empire. You don't know what's good for you. Shin Jingon snorted coldly, and his figure rose into the air, and then his spear shot out like a dragon. A ray of cold light suddenly appeared, and an extremely cold aura suddenly swept out in all directions, destroying the universe, and colliding with the golden gust of wind. Buzz! Suddenly, a terrifying roar resounded through the sky, and everyone saw that the space where the two attacks collided instantly shattered. A wisp of power spread out, and it was enough to kill an ordinary honorable. Chapter 1155. Boom! Spiritual power scattered in all directions, and the aura of the great Tao collided and destroyed everything. Just a casual collision was enough to kill countless supremacy prodigies in Tao Sky City. This was the Azure Sky Monster, the true top prodigy of the current generation. At this moment, everyone was looking at the two figures standing opposite each other in the air. Their eyes flickered with intense fear. Everyone had the opportunity to listen to the Tao Sky City Lord's lecture. However, there were tens of thousands of prodigies in Tao Sky City. How could a lecture hall accommodate all of them? Therefore, the qualification to enter the hall had to be fought for with one's strength and talent. After all, the closer one was to a sage's Tao discussion, the easier it was to feel the Tao rhyme true intent, and the easier it was to achieve enlightenment. Now, it seemed that both Shaoyang Lord and Marquis Bloodclad had the chance to be in the top 10. Compared to the two of them, most of the prodigies present were like ants that were not worth mentioning. As expected of Marquis Bloodclad, "You can actually resist my sun god power with your mortal body." Shaoyang Lord's face was slightly gloomy. He was the descendant of a great emperor and was born with a sacred body and divine blood. He had never taken these prodigies seriously. His immortal path was the end of the universe. Even the 10 great sequences of the azure firmament were nothing but empty titles in his eyes. However, he had to admit that Shin Jingon was very strong. The Tao rhyme contained in the spear was enough to break his defense and threaten his life. Interesting. He had not come to Tao Sky City to listen to the Tao Sky City Lord's lecture. What was the use of an old man who had not even become a great emperor, even if he had read the human race's scriptures and comprehended many Tao rhymes? He was still a heavenly sovereign, a mortal that a great emperor could easily kill. He had come here for the Myriad Talents banquet. Every time there was a banquet, the Sky Saint Business Alliance would take out a treasure for everyone to fight for. This time, he was determined to win. Resist. Shinjingan's cold face had a sinister smile that did not match his temperament. Tao rhyme seemed to flow around him, and countless blood runes began to coil around the silver spear. They were like living creatures, exuding a terrifying sharpness. Everyone could vaguely feel that the current Shin Jingon was the true divine martial god of slaughter. Even immortals and demons could not stop him. Then, why don't you try taking a shot from me? Shin Jingon suddenly raised his head, the corner of his mouth smiling sinisterly. His pair of eagle eyes had already turned blood red. However, the more it was like this, the more it gave people an inexplicable sense of intimidation. Among the crowd, there was already a girl with her hands clasped together. If it wasn't for the presence of the divine martial grand princess, she would have already lost control of her greed. Hum! Between heaven and earth, the sound of spears suddenly rang out. The silver spear in Shinjingan's hand suddenly transformed into a blood dragon. It was at least 1,000 feet long and seemed to be connected to his arm. At this moment, the entire Tao Heaven City seemed to be shrouded in dark clouds. Only the silver-armored, blood-spear figure with his hair tied up with a golden crown remained, looking down on everything. But one day, with a gun in hand, I'll kill all the pretentious dogs in the world. Humph! Do you think this monarch will be afraid of a human ant like you? The young Sun Lord sneered as sunlight rose from his body. His entire being turned into a sun, releasing a dazzling divine light. Although He didn't know if those great emperor ancestors were still alive, but the elders in the small palace had told him that he wasn't a human. He was a descendant of the sun. He was the descendant of God, with the world's most ancient and sacred bloodline flowing in his veins. His Tao was invincible. Humans, demons, ghosts, and barbarians should all submit to him. A terrifying heat wave surged out like a tidal wave. The sharpness that had originally permeated the heavens and earth had silently diminished. Shin Jingon frowned slightly. Although he didn't have the slightest bit of carelessness in his heart, but it seemed that he had underestimated this descendant of the Sunlight Emperor. Arrogant. However, just as Shin Jingon took a step forward, the blood spear in his hand pierced through the void and was about to kill the young Sun Lord. A cold and gentle voice suddenly came from the golden carriage in the distance. Marquis. Shin Jingon stopped in his tracks and turned to look at the carriage. He saw a fair and slender hand suddenly lift the curtain of the carriage and reach out. Cough, cough. Immediately after, a coughing sound was heard. Shin Jingon immediately retracted his spear and walked to the front of the carriage. He raised his hand and held that fair and slender hand. Eldest Princess, I've long heard that the young Sun Lord is extremely talented and has a terrifying bloodline. Cough, cough, cough. Today I've finally met you. You really live up to your reputation. The curtain of the carriage was lifted, and a woman in a golden robe slowly walked out and appeared in front of everyone. She was a beautiful woman with a pale face and a delicate body. She didn't wear any makeup and had a delicate temperament. Her skin was delicate, and her hair was tied up in a bun with a phoenix hairpin. She had a dignified aura. The divine martial eldest princess, Wu Hongqiu. It was rumored that this eldest princess had a tragic life. Her mother was originally the divine martial emperor's descendant, but she died in an accident when giving birth to her. Later on, the divine martial emperor established a new one. Although Wu Hongqiu had the title of eldest princess, she didn't have much honor. Until she was bestowed a marriage and became the fiancée of the blood-robed Marquis, Shen Jingon, which made her famous in the imperial city. Shen Jingon had once entered the palace for her and forcefully suppressed the imperial concubines and princes, which infuriated the imperial court. However, this matter was left unsettled in the end, and the name Shen Jingon had become a taboo in the divine martial emperor dynasty. Oh, eldest princess, you flatter me. Tsk. What a pity. Such a beauty is actually a sickly person. The young Sun Lord smiled coldly. Instantly, killing intent surged in Shen Jingon's eyes. However, Wu Hongqiu grabbed his hand and he couldn't move. Young Sun Lord, you better restrain yourself. This is Dao Heaven City. I'm just a marquis of the divine martial emperor dynasty. Perhaps I don't dare to offend the divine martial emperor palace, but some people might not give you face. Shen Jingon snorted. He naturally knew Wu Hongqiu's concerns. Now that the blood-robed marquis was in the limelight, there were already forces in the imperial court that were ready to take action. It wasn't a wise move to offend the young Sun Lord now. Ha 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 ha. Not giving me face? Let me ask you, who in the entire Qing Tsang dares to not give me face? The young Sun Lord laughed maniacally as he looked around the crowd. Instantly, many prodigies' expressions changed, and they turned their heads to look elsewhere. It was obvious that after witnessing the divine martial emperor palace's prodigy's strength, everyone was already fearful of him. Seeing this, the young Sun Lord's smile widened. On the other hand, Shen Jingon held his silver spear tightly as his face darkened. Chirp! At that moment, a loud phoenix cry suddenly came from the sky. Immediately after, a pair of green phoenix wings descended from the sky, covering the clouds and the sun. Vast demonic aura gathered into clouds, causing countless demonic beasts in the city to kneel on the ground and tremble. And on that green phoenix, A tall and slender figure stood with her hands behind her back. Her beauty was peerless, and her temperament was unparalleled. The indifference in her beautiful eyes was like the deepest abyss in the nine heavens palace. Gu Chao Ci. Chapter 1156. Gu Chao Xia. The entire Dao Sky City suddenly quietened down. One could even hear a pin drop. At this moment, all the prodigies were looking at the unparalleled figure standing on top of the phoenix in shock. Unknowingly, a look of fascination appeared on their faces. However, for some reason, many people felt that Gu Chao Ci was a little different today. Wait. Praising the Empress is wearing a black imperial robe? The imperial robe was embroidered with golden threads. The clouds were floating and the rivers were falling. Compared to her usual self, this black-robed Gu Chao Ci looked even more mysterious and graceful. Even though she was less charming, but the Empress seemed to have never been associated with seductive charms. Even Lord Xiaoyang and Shen Jingan were stunned at this moment. The great Empress Immortal Phoenix Gu Chao Ci was the only woman in the world who stood at the pinnacle of beauty. She was ethereal, cold, domineering, and unparalleled. Even Wu Hongqiu felt ashamed in front of her and secretly shook her head. Slap! Suddenly, a crisp slap sounded from the crowd. A young prodigy spat out a mouthful of blood and a few broken teeth. Then, everyone was dumbstruck as they watched him start to slap his own face repeatedly, nagging like a crazy demon. How many lives do you have? How dare you look at praising the Empress? Master Ling Xiao will kill you. Hearing this, many prodigies' faces turned pale. They forced themselves to look elsewhere. However, Gu Chaozi did not care about the people below her. She stepped forward and turned into a rainbow, disappearing from the ancient city. Haha, if I remember correctly, the Immortal Phoenix Ancient Dynasty is a vassal of the Divine Martial Kingdom. You, the Marquis, and the eldest princess are here, but Gu Chao Ci did not even look at you. Ha 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 ha. Lord Xiaoyang laughed sarcastically and shook his head slightly. If I were to be like her one day, I would not have the face to walk in this world. Marquis Bloodrobed was just a bluff. Just now, Lord Xiaoyang seemed to have said that no one in the Azure Sky City would dare to disrespect you. I see that great Empress Gu did not even look at you. Shin Jingan imitated Lord Xiaoyang and shook his head lightly. You are a human, but you have to pretend to be high and mighty. Does your face hurt? You! Shin Jingan, don't think that I don't know what you are thinking. You just want me to provoke Gu Chao Ci and attract the revenge of the young master of the Ling people. Lord Xiaoyang's eyes were gloomy, but his face was overbearing. To tell you the truth, I came to Dao Heaven City today to challenge the true evildoers of the Azure Sky City and prove my Dao heart. Not to mention the young master of the Ling people. Even if the young master of the Realm Lord Palace is in the Shuexian echelon, if he dares to have a fair fight with me, I will let him know what it means to be invincible. Gu Chao Ci, in my eyes, is just a coward who has been protected by others. Hearing this, there was an uproar in the crowd. Lord Xiaoyang's words were indeed arrogant. However, the strength that he had displayed just now was indeed enough to look down on his peers. The arch bloodline, sacred sun physique. Once this sacred sun physique matured, it would shine as brightly as the sun and be indestructible. Which prodigy did not have some pride in their hearts? Since they were born, they naturally wanted to fight for the title of emperor and suppress their generation. Lord Xiaoyang had the strength. Is that so? However, just as everyone was pondering in their hearts and looking shocked, a gentle laugh suddenly came from thousands of miles away in the void. Everyone looked up in a daze, and in the next moment, their eyes suddenly focused. At that moment, above the void, there was a 1,000-foot-long golden dragon standing on the clouds. Spiritual light bloomed around its body, and there were thousands of auspicious signs. Its aura had reached the terrifying level of a saint. Behind the golden dragon was a white jade carriage, and inside it sat 3 figures, 1 male and 2 females. The youth was dressed in black, and had a peerless appearance. He held a jade cup in his hand, and there was an extremely gentle smile on his face. As for the 2 females, they each had their own merit. One was quiet and gentle in her white dress, while the other was cold and aloof in her colorful feather dress. However, it was undeniable that both of their appearances could be said to be peerless in the world. Their figures were graceful and elegant. Not to mention the 2 of them, even if they could be of one heart, it would be a blessing in the world. However, at that moment, they were sitting beside the youth cautiously. Their eyes were filled with obedience and greed as they looked at him. "This is Amitabha." Before everyone could be shocked, another white-robed figure stepped out from behind the jade carriage. His expression was calm, and there was a Buddhist glow around him. Every step he took was filled with an endless Buddhist aura. Only the red lotus in between his eyebrows added a bit of seductiveness. "Shiji Bodhisattva. It's Yaoguang Bodhisattva. That lady in the feather dress seems to be Jin Han, the princess of the Golden Crow dynasty. Xianyuan princess, Xianyuan Weiyang. That youth, it's Master Ling Xiao. It's Master Ling Xiao. Looking for a lamb, it seems that he's not listening to the West anymore. He just stretched out his hand. What are you waiting for? Lick it." The crowd began to exclaim, and the commotion continued. Among the 4 people in front of them, 3 of them were the true prodigies of the Azure continent. Even Jin Han was powerful, and had a deep foundation now that the Golden Crow dynasty had unified the 4 dynasties. Moreover, a few days ago, the 4 of them had fought the Sky Demon in the Spirit Divine realm and destroyed the evil-gone Heaven Divine sect. They had also accumulated supreme sage names. They did not expect that they would be lucky enough to see the 4 demon slayer heroes with their own eyes today. Especially Ling Xiao, who could be said to be the pillar of the righteous path in the Azure continent. He was the current human emperor and invincible. Many disciples of the immortal sects and prides of the ancient races did not come to Dao Sky City for the Palace Master's lecture. They just wanted to have a chance to submit to the young master and become his follower. Master Ling Xiao. The young master is looking at me. I'm speechless. Young master, I'm willing to call you the best in the Azure continent. Let me be your loyal dog. Woof, woof, woof. Waves of exclamations reverberated through the sky. Countless streams of light descended from the sky, bowing and saluting the figure on the jade chariot. Compared to the young master, Lord Xiaoyang and Xin Jing, and were all mortals and had no power. I remember that I said that anyone who dares to humiliate my wife in the Azure continent will be killed without mercy. On the jade carriage, Ling Xiao put down the jade cup and slowly stood up. He looked down at the gloomy Lord Xiaoyang. Sacred Emperor Palace? Tharch bloodline? Wei Wuye was also known as one of the 5 Tharch bloodlines, but he was still killed by Ling Xiao with 1 strike. Sacred Sun Body, 6th stage Venerable Realm. Light and extreme Yang Dao laws. No providence. Is this what you have to show off? Arrogant. Lord Xiaoyang snorted and pretended to be calm. At this moment, he suddenly realized that when he faced the young master of the Taigu Ling people, he would still feel fear. That kind of natural pretentious intent. No, it was the Tao and immortal intent. It gave people a terrifying pressure. Guchaoxiai was Ling Zhao's forbidden area. Everyone in the Azure continent knew this. Although he had the strength to compete with all the monsters in the world, but he was still pitifully small in front of the Taigu Ling people. If this young master of the Ling people did not care about martial virtues and sent experts to attack him, wouldn't he be dead meat? Yes. I'm not afraid of him. I'm afraid of the patriarchs in his clan. I have an invincible Tao heart. Fine. Since all the clans and sects in the Azure continent are here today, I'll help you remember and deepen your impressions. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. His clothes fluttered in the wind. Countless divine lotuses bloomed under his feet. The Tao sound extended for 90,000 miles. Vaguely, it was as if the great Tao's divine shadow had descended and was added to his body, looking down on everyone. All of a sudden, the entire world became strangely still. Heaven and earth were silent. Everyone in the Azure continent was afraid. Then, the young man calmly stretched out his palm and pressed it toward Lord Xiaoyang. Hum! Chapter 1157. Heaven and earth went silent and the sky collapsed. Everyone only saw a lightning palm print descending from the sky like a falling meteor, tearing a deep crack in the sky. Boundless pressure descended from the sky. Purple energy rose and fell for 90,000 li, creating many strange phenomena. At this moment, everyone only felt that the entire Tao Sky City was about to be destroyed by this palm print. The primordial chaos was awakened, and the primordial chaos was born. The endless sea of stars fell one after another, blocking Xiaoyang Lord's escape route. Boom! Before the palm print landed, the ancient bluestone road within a 50-mile radius had already collapsed. This is impossible. At this moment, Xiaoyang Lord's face no longer had any trace of arrogance or battle intent. Large beads of cold sweat flowed down his face, instantly drenching his entire shirt. Under Ling Zhao's seal, he actually saw the terrifying power of time, void, primal chaos, and all sorts of other unspeakable powers. Even with his strength, he couldn't even escape from such a Taoist rhyme. How is this possible? How could a person at the Exalt realm possibly comprehend such a profound grand Tao? I cannot die. I have the bloodline of the Dharch, the successor of the sun. Following a loud shout, Xiaoyang Lord's body suddenly emitted a dazzling golden light. It was like a sun that wanted to destroy the sea of stars. But what was frightening was that before Xiaoyang Lord could step out, the lightning palm print had already descended from the sky and destroyed all the divine light around him. Then, he was smashed into the ground. Pucci. A thick smell of blood rose. Xiaoyang Lord, who was as powerful as a Thearcha's successor in everyone's eyes, was actually suppressed by Lord Ling Xiao with one palm print? He could not fight back at all. No, he could not even fight back. This is too powerful? Young master, you are awesome. In the crowd, countless ancient race prodigies and immortal sect disciples trembled. Their eyes were filled with shock and fear. Even Shen Jing and Wu Hongchao's faces were filled with shock and fear. If it was said that they had all heard that the Ling people's young master, Ling Xiao, was invincible, however, after seeing it today, he realized that this was not a rumor. Earlier, Shen Jing had already exchanged blows with the young Sun Lord, so he had some understanding of the latter's strength. Even though Shen Jing was proud and arrogant, he had to admit that if he wanted to defeat young Yang Lord with his strength, he would have to risk his life. However, Ling Xiao had only struck out with a single palm strike. Everyone could tell that he had only struck out casually, yet he had completely suppressed the young emperor of the sacred Emperor Palace. Too scary. This is true invincibility. I can't think of anyone who can contend against young master. Perhaps only the 10 great sequences have the power to fight him. Exclamations and soft sighs rose and fell one after another. Ling Xiao lifted his foot and walked to the front of the deep gully. He looked at one of the figures whose bones were completely shattered. With a gentle wave of his hand, a palm imprint appeared out of nowhere and grabbed the figure in his hand. After that, he calmly swept his gaze over the crowd, and a wisp of icy indifference appeared on his face. I'll repeat myself once more. Those who insult my wife, regardless of whether they're immortals, gods, demons, or beasts, will be killed without mercy. No. Young master, please spare my life. I won't show off anymore. Master Ling Xiao. Just as Ling Xiao shook his head and gradually exerted more strength in his palm, a shout suddenly came from the ancient palace far away. Hua Mingxi, who was dressed in white, floated over with an extremely gentle smile on her pretty face. She first took a look at young Lord, who had already gone limp. Then, she shook her head and smiled bitterly. Young master, Dao Heaven City has a rule. No one is allowed to kill in the city. Otherwise they will be cracked. However, before Hua Mingxi could finish her sentence, young Lord's head suddenly twisted to the side. Ling Xiao casually threw his head to the ground and walked past Hua Mingxi with an indifferent expression, heading into the distance. I'm sorry. This is my first time in Dao Heaven City. I didn't know there was such a rule. Hua Mingxi covered her red lips with her jade-like hand. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. He was overbearing and disregarded the rules. Yet, he was infatuated and loyal. Even though he had 3 top ladies standing beside him, the only one who could anger him was the cold empress of the Celestial Dynasty. When Shen Jing and young Lord were fighting, Hua Mingxi had already appeared in front of the ancient palace. However, she couldn't be bothered with such a fight. She could even use this opportunity to observe who was more useful between the two of them. The winner would naturally receive more respect. As for the loser, it was enough to be pitied. However, it was rumored that the Saint Emperor Palace was guarded by a powerful great emperor. Yet, this Ling people's young master didn't seem to care about them at all. Could it be that the Ling People's Foundation was really so terrifying? Or could it be that his love for Gu Chao Ci was beyond life? Cough cough. Just as Hua Mingxi was in a daze, a light cough came from behind her. Jean Han walked over from the side and flicked her forehead lightly. Mingxi, what are you waiting for? Hua Mingxi's expression turned serious. Then, a sincere smile appeared on her face. She didn't know how this arrogant princess of the Celestial Dynasty became the follower of the Ling people's young master. However, she seemed to be enjoying it. How is it? Isn't my young master very charming? This is your chance. Jean Han blinked. A sly and seductive smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Hua Mingxi shook her head with a bitter smile. She held Jean Han-er's hand and said, "Don't laugh at me. With my status, how can I catch his eye? Moreover, I'm praising the Empress." Hua Mingxi lowered her voice when she said the last sentence. At this moment, she suddenly realized that the cold-looking Empress Immortal Phoenix was wearing an imperial robe that was extremely compatible with Master Ling Xiao. Ever since Gu Chao Ci became famous, she was wearing a red robe. However, she chose a black imperial robe with golden threads for this trip to Dao Heaven City. That's not necessarily true. My Mingxi is very understanding and gentle. Who knows, young master might like her. The two of them joked around as they chased after Ling Xiao. The onlookers on the ancient street only recovered from their shock after the few figures walked into the ancient palace. Especially at this moment, when they saw the limp corpse on the ground, they felt that it was extremely unreal. A peerless genius who was high and mighty in their eyes, like a god, was so easily slapped to death by someone's palm? This Ling people's young master is indeed very affectionate. Wu Hongxi's eyes trembled. She suddenly smiled bitterly as she watched the black-robed figure disappear. In the entire Azure continent, there were less than 10 people who dared to kill young master Xiao Yang so brazenly. Only this descendant of the Ling people would dare to use such a reason to kill young master Xiao Yang. He killed him just because he called him cowardly? This person is very powerful. Shen Jing took a deep breath. His face was gloomy. Suddenly, he seemed to realize that he didn't even have the courage to use his spear in front of this domineering young master. The Emperor's momentum was obvious. This was the true Tao of invincibility. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.